Chapter 40. Unfortunately, after all, it is only made of ordinary mountain stones, but it can't bear even one more enchantment. The strength of these yellow scarf warriors is quite low. Luo Fan sighed in his heart. While sighing, his earth immortal Tao fruit shook slightly, and a three-dimensional talisman appeared out of thin air. It instantly replenished the spiritual power unit that had been turned into yellow light. The three-dimensional talisman that constituted the earth immortal Tao fruit instantly returned to the complete number of 129,600. He raised his hand and waved gently, and the 10 yellow scarf warriors stood up without any expression. These 10 big men had yellowish skin, messy long hair, and a yellow ribbon wrapped around their forehead. They wore a short shirt that exposed the right shoulder, and a pair of yellow trousers that were suitable for activity. The muscles all over their body were bulging, and they looked quite strong and powerful. Their image was exactly what Luo Fan imagined about the yellow scarf warriors. However, these yellow scarf warriors seemed to be alive, but in fact they were just a kind of robot-like existence. They didn't even have thoughts. Compared to the Limitless Boy, they were many times worse. The yellow scarf warriors, refined by the summoning secrets of the strongman, were divided into 36 levels. Every time a layer of enchantment was refined, its level would be increased. These 10 yellow scarf warriors only refined one layer of enchantment. Even the lowest level yellow scarf warrior could only do some trivial things such as cleaning, moving things, washing clothes, and cooking. Their strength was no more than 3 times that of an adult strong man. However, this was enough. Luo Fan didn't want these yellow scarf warriors to help him fight. It was enough to help with some trivial things. Although he was almost omnipotent in this lesser kiliacosm, and he could clean up any place in the palace with just a thought, he could do it. But he was the master of a mini kiliacosm. Did he have to clean these things every day? That was simply a waste of life. Limitless Boy, arrange for the 10 of them to manage the Lingju Palace. Luo Fan said in an indifferent tone. Yes. The voice of the Limitless Boy was extremely ethereal, as if it was the answer of the whole world. This was the situation when he integrated into the Limitless Palace. As soon as the Limitless Boy finished his words, the 10 yellow scarf warriors disappeared in an instant. When they reappeared, they were scattered in various positions in the Lingju Palace. The yellow scarf warriors and the Limitless Boy were essentially the same, but the Limitless Boy had wisdom and thought. Apart from not having self-awareness, they were no different from the Limitless Boy. Not to mention this was the lowest level Yellow Turban Strongman. Even the highest level Yellow Turban Strongman with 36 restrictions would only have half of the Limitless Boy's level of wisdom. Unless it could become a magic treasure, it would not be comparable to the Limitless Boy at all. Therefore, they needed the Limitless Boy to arrange their work, and the Limitless Boy was also able to arrange their work. After these 10 Yellow Turban Strongmen were in place, it seemed that Limitless Boy had already infused all the knowledge they needed into their spiritual senses. Therefore, they did not hesitate at all and immediately began to get busy. Those who cleaned, moved, and watered were all very conscientious. The Zenith Palace, which had not been cleaned for more than 3,000 years, finally received its first cleaning since its creation. At this moment, Luo Fan's mind moved slightly. He already knew that the Yellow Turban Strongman had arranged everything properly, so he put this matter to the back of his mind. The Hercules summoning technique is quite wonderful, but I wonder how powerful a Yellow Turban Hercules with 36 restrictions would be? Luo Fan had some doubts in his heart, but at the same time, he was eager to give it a try. Even though this cultivation method was created by him, it was just a fantasy after all. He wasn't very clear about the intricacies of this cultivation method. Since he had all the time in the world, he didn't hesitate. Since he wanted to know, he might as well do it. With a thought, with the help of the Limitless Void Palace's super-strong amplification effect on perception, he had already checked all the terrain within 1,000,000 miles. The ground had a strong blocking effect on perception. After being amplified, his perception could sweep within 1,000,000 miles, but after aiming at the ground, he could only perceive the depth of 500 miles. It was reduced by 1,000 times. 1,000,000 miles was equivalent to a ball with a diameter of 1,000,000 miles. The maximum range of perception in all directions was 500,000 miles. It was weakened by 1,000 times. Although this made Luo Fan feel a little regretful, it was still quite amazing. In the blink of an eye, within 1,000,000 miles, the situation of all the depths of the ground appeared in Luo Fan's mind. The underground resources were quite rich. There were countless refining materials such as iron, copper, earth, crystal, and so on. Using his mind to perceive, Luo Fan was almost dazzled. There are hundreds of primal chaos origin energy sources. It's really a great treasure. Luo Fan exclaimed inwardly as he paid attention to the underground scene in his mind. Unfortunately, among these hundreds of chaotic vitality sources, he didn't feel any signs of the existence of chaotic vitality stones. This made him feel slightly regretful. Originally, when he found so many chaotic vitality sources, he planned to use the mystery of chaotic vitality stones to sacrifice and refine a magic treasure-level yellow turban strongman. After a careful inspection, he had already determined his target. With a slight thought, his figure flashed and he was already out of the limitless void palace. Looking down in midair, Hongjun was still fighting against the turbulent water. But now, he had completely immersed himself in it. He had completely forgotten everything in the outside world. An aura of enlightenment gradually emanated from his body. It was a kind of enlightenment that he could abandon everything in order to pursue his goal. He could even abandon his life. Looking at Hongjun, Luo Fan suddenly felt excited. With a slight thought, a kind of enlightenment was born in his heart. It turns out that in order for Hongjun to achieve Tao fruit, he needs to go through 9 tribulations. Along with this enlightenment, countless complex characters flowed through his mind and eventually turned into a mantra that floated in his mind and mind, drifting erratically. This was a kind of mantra to calculate the secrets of heaven, yin-yang test method. Because the world had just been created, yin-yang had just been judged, and the secrets of heaven were not revealed, so the power of this method was only ordinary. In those 3,000 years, after trying hundreds of times without any results, he had already thrown it aside. At this moment, he had some enlightenment in his heart, so he took it out again. With the appearance of this mantra, he pinched his fingers and calculated. Layers of light and shadow flashed in front of him. In an instant, he had already calculated that the first tribulation that Hongjun would go through would be 3 years later. It seems that I have to find a magic tool for Hongjun to protect himself. That magic tool embryo is barely enough to protect him, but it's still not enough for him to go through the tribulations. Luo Fan thought to himself. Since he had already become Hongjun's master, he needed to plan for him. What's more, Hongjun had sworn to serve him for life and never betray him. Naturally, he could not treat Hongjun badly. At this time, there was not much of a problem with Hongjun's strength, but in terms of attack and defense, he was far from enough. Although the tribulation 3 years later was not as good as when he achieved the Earth Immortal Tao fruit, it was not something that Hongjun could go through with his own strength. With this idea in mind, Luo Fan instantly made changes to his plan. He didn't show himself. Instead, he turned around and transformed into an invisible streak of light, flying toward the southeast alone. He did not use the power of the Void Wuji Palace, but only relied on his own supernatural power. This flying speed was more than twice as fast as when he rode on the clouds. This long rainbow was a minor divine ability that he had cultivated in the past 3,000 years. Luo Fan's destination was 280,000 miles to the southeast. The speed of the long rainbow was quite amazing. In an instant, he had already arrived at his destination. Standing in the void, he observed the surrounding situation and compared it with the information that the Void Wuji Palace had sensed in his mind. In the blink of an eye, he knew where the item he wanted was. Chapter 41. The location that Luo Fan chose was an ancient forest that was rarely seen in the untainted land. This forest covered an area of about 1,000 miles, which was not very wide. But there were ancient trees that were hundreds of thousands of feet high everywhere. Looking up, they were all huge ancient trees that could not be hugged tightly by two people, towering into the sky. Among these towering ancient trees, although none of them could compare to the strange tree that had spiritual awareness, but there were still quite a few that were a bit inferior, a bit shorter. However, among these towering ancient trees, no matter how huge they were, no matter how close they were to the strange tree with spiritual awareness, none of them had spiritual awareness. Not even a trace, the weakest seed of spiritual awareness. When Luo Fan perceived this location through the Void Wuji Palace, he already knew the reason. At this time, looking here again, he was not surprised. The formation of this forest was completely different from the strange tree with spiritual awareness that Luo Fan had encountered before. At the beginning of the world, the primordial energy had undergone some kind of mysterious and profound transformation, and it had given birth to a seed. This seed had then continuously absorbed the primordial energy, and finally, it had grown to its current state. But this forest was different. This whole ancient forest was formed by the combination of the first wood essence and the primordial qi. The first wood essence was distributed to the ground through countless small channels hundreds of miles deep underground. During this process, the first wood essence in every passageway underwent some sort of mysterious transformation. It absorbed a huge amount of natural qi and transformed into numerous ancient trees, clumps of flowers and grasses. In the end, this ancient forest was formed. The vegetation on the untainted land, whether it was flowers, plants, or trees, no matter how precious the natural treasures were, most of them were formed by various kinds of wood essence, such as the existence of the first wood essence, the existence of the second wood essence, combined with other 5 elements essence, and then absorbed the primordial qi. For example, some plants were formed by the combination of the essence of wood and the essence of earth, such as the essence of earth and the essence of earth. Some plants were formed by the combination of the essence of wood and the essence of fire, such as the essence of fire and the essence of fire. Similar to this, there were also the combinations of the essence of wood and the essence of fire, such as the essence of wood and metal, wood and water, wood and water, wood and fire and earth, and so on and so forth. The different types, quantities, and ratios of the essence of the 5 elements combined to form the first batch of hundreds of millions of strange plants with different effects and powers in the primordial world. After the first batch of plants were formed, they continued to multiply and extend for hundreds of thousands of years. Only then did they form the primordial world that was full of vitality today. These plants looked exactly the same as the plants that were born from chaotic yuan qi, but they had a huge weakness. That was, for this kind of plant that was formed from the combination of the essence of the 5 elements, it was thousands of times more difficult to produce spiritual consciousness than the plants that were born from the primordial qi. It could be said that it was impossible for them to produce spiritual consciousness if they did not have great luck or great fortune. The ancient forest in front of Luo Fan was transformed from the pure essence of the first wood absorbing the innate vitality. Naturally, it was also a plant formed by the essence of the 5 elements. Therefore, there were so many ancient trees in this forest that had the conditions to produce spiritual consciousness, but none of them could produce spiritual consciousness. The reason why Luo Fan chose to come here was not for this forest. Instead, it was for the essence of the first wood 100 miles below the forest. This essence of the first wood was very huge. It had been hundreds of thousands of years since the beginning of the world, but it still had not transformed into this forest. Most of the essence of the first wood was still left 100 miles below the ground. The huge amount of the remaining essence was quite rare. Luo Fan's mind moved, and his body rushed straight down. When he was about to touch the ground, a mantra flowed through his mind. As the mantra flowed through his mind, his body slightly changed, and like a phantom, he rushed into the ground. During the whole process, the ground didn't block him in the slightest. This kind of magical power was a small magical power that Luo Fan had cultivated for more than 3,000 years, Earth Escape. Using the Earth Escape magical power to walk underground, the feeling was like wandering in the water, very mysterious and very comfortable. Although the speed would be slowed down, it was still extremely fast. In a short time, Luo Fan's figure had come to the ground 100 miles below the ground. The essence of the first wood suddenly appeared in front of him. This was a spherical space with a diameter of 150 feet. A green sphere was suspended in the center of this spherical space. It was about 120 feet in diameter, filled with green mist like a sea urchin. There were traces of green mist emitted from it and poured into countless small channels around it. With a move of his mind, 2 golden lights were released from Luo Fan's eyes and shone on the green sphere. In an instant, the structure of the entire sphere appeared in Luo Fan's eyes. This green sphere was completely composed of pure first wood essence. The first wood essence with a diameter of 100 feet was completely condensed into a solid crystalline form. The outer 20 feet thick first wood essence was between the gaseous and liquid state, like smoke. Compared with the great immortal in this spherical space, Luo Fan knew that this first wood essence should originally have a diameter of 150 feet, and it should be solid crystalline. Obviously, after more than 100,000 years of volatilization, nearly 1/3 of the first wood essence had turned into the ancient forest above. Understanding this, Luo Fan could not help but secretly feel pity. Putting away the clairvoyant magical ability, he raised his right hand and pointed to the first wood essence. The Earth Immortal Tao fruit in the lower abdomen suddenly broke out of a magical power unit, flowed along the meridians, rushed out of his right hand, and flew toward the first wood essence. It grew with the wind and flew bigger and bigger. When it approached the first wood essence, this dust-like magical power unit had become a 3-dimensional talisman with a height of 10 feet and the shape of Buzhou Mountain. This 3-dimensional talisman came to the edge of the first wood essence, suddenly turned, with the bottom facing the first wood essence, and at the same time, there was a strong attraction. The huge first wood essence seemed to be compressed and pulled by an invisible giant hand. It quickly moved toward the 3-dimensional talisman, and in the process of moving, it continued to become smaller. When it came into contact with the 3-dimensional talisman, its size had shrunk to the size of a basketball. It could no longer resist the strong attraction of the 3-dimensional talisman, and floated into the 3-dimensional talisman. After the 3-dimensional talisman absorbed the first wood essence, it quickly became smaller. In the blink of an eye, it turned into the size of a speck of dust. With a quick rush, it rushed straight into the body of Luo Fan. This was a storage method that Luo Fan had studied for a long time. This was the first experiment, and the result was obviously very satisfactory. Turning his head and looking around, there was nothing particularly noteworthy in this area of 150 feet. Luo Fan once again used the Earth Escape technique and drilled up. In a short time, he had returned to the ground. Hanging in the air, looking down, the ancient forest below had changed slightly. Originally, this forest exuded vitality, but at this time, it had become gloomy, as if it had entered old age and was about to die. "I'm sorry," Luo Fan sighed in his heart. He knew that what he had done was to cut off the chance for the forest to have a spiritual sense. Originally, if this first wood essence existed, the difficulty of the ancient trees in this forest to produce spiritual awareness was high to the point of being close to impossible, but after all, there was still a slight chance. Now that the nourishment of the first wood essence was lost, this slight chance was completely cut off. Although he sighed, he did not hesitate. He turned around, turned into a rainbow, and flew toward the northwest direction. In an instant, he returned to the place where the void Wuji Palace was hidden. With a move of his mind, he had already entered the void Wuji palace that was hidden in the air. After sitting on the platform, he raised his hand and waved. The spiritual power unit that collected the first wood essence rushed out of his body. With a rotation, the first wood essence was released, and it floated in front of him. This first wood essence should be able to withstand 36 enchantments. If it is used to refine the Yellow Turban Strongman, it can definitely refine the highest level of the Yellow Turban Strongman. If I arrange some means on it, it will be enough to serve as the treasure of Hongjuan's calamity. Luo Fan pondered in his heart. Chapter 42. After Luo Fan carefully thought about it, he made a decision. He raised his hand and pointed at the first wood crystal. The spirit space was slightly distorted, and the 120 feet first wood crystal collapsed with a loud bang. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a green cloud that was tens of acres in size. It floated up until it was 100 feet above Luo Fan's head, and kept rolling. The apex palace was located at the peak of a towering mountain. It was 100 feet above Luo Fan's head, and naturally, it was above this mountain. From afar, this dark green cloud was like a canopy that covered the peak of the mountain. It surged and changed, and it looked rather spectacular. Luo Fan's mind moved slightly, and the mantra of the Hercules summoning secrets flowed through his mind. In the earthly immortal's Tao fruit, in an instant, there were 666 units of spiritual power that suddenly broke away, condensed into a ball, and followed the route of the Hercules summoning secrets, to quickly flow in the meridians of his body. After these 666 units of spiritual power went through 9 cycles, they could no longer maintain the shape of the spiritual power unit. They suddenly exploded, and their volume soared by 10,000 times, turning into a yellow light. This yellow light circulated in his body, and gradually gathered in the palm of his right hand. With the gathering of this yellow light, his right palm gradually emitted a faint yellow light, and in the process, there was a slight vibration, as if there was a powerful heart beating in the palm of his hand. An indescribable vitality radiated from his palm. The entire thunder pool was shrouded in this vitality, and it seemed to be more agile. Luo Fan's eyes flashed. He raised his right hand and patted towards the sky. A beam of light suddenly spurted out from his palm and rushed straight up to 1,000 feet into the sky. Then, it directly rushed into the dozens of acres of dark green clouds. After the yellow light entered the dark green cloud, it instantly disappeared. On the other hand, the dark green cloud seemed to be stirred by an invisible force, creating an indescribable chaos. After that, countless strands of yellow light tore apart the dark green cloud like strands of laser light. They shot out from the dark green cloud and condensed around it. They constantly twisted, swam, condensed, and purified. In the end, they transformed into 129,600 complicated and profound talismans. These complex and mysterious seals interweaved together under a very mysterious mechanism, forming a restriction that Luo Fan was very familiar with, the first restriction of the Yellow Turban Strongman. After this restriction was completely formed, it suddenly shrunk. The dark green cloud that was enveloped by this restriction seemed to be under an irresistible and terrifying pressure, and at the same time, it contracted violently. The speed at which it shrunk was extremely fast. In just a few breaths, the entire jade-green cloud, that was dozens of acres in size, had shrunk to a radius of 30 feet. Furthermore, under the effect of the restriction, it was constantly twisting and changing shape, gradually condensing into a rough and simple human figure. The yellow light on its surface flowed, and the 129,600 talismans shuttled and swam in it. All kinds of unspeakable mysteries were constantly reflected in this process. Then, the humanoid first wood spirit that was wrapped in the restriction sank down. In the blink of an eye, it had come to the front of Luo Fan. Luo Fan looked at the first wood essence and once again raised his right hand and patted it. Another yellow light rushed out of his right hand and quickly shuttled and condensed in the air. Finally, it turned into 259,200 talismans, constructing a more complicated and more mysterious restriction. After this restriction was formed, it did not stop at all. It directly went into the first wood spirit that was wrapped in the restriction. In an instant, the first wood spirit underwent another drastic change. The whole humanoid first wood spirit shrank a circle, and its surface trembled, expanding and contracting, as if there was an extra heart in it. Luo Fan did not stop. He raised his hand and continued to make noises. A stream of yellow light rushed out of his hand and condensed into a layer of restriction in the air. It was continuously slammed into the first wood spirit. 36 restrictions. After an unknown amount of time, Luo Fan had continuously slammed a total of 36 restrictions into the first wood spirit. Among these 36 restrictions, each restriction was more complicated and mysterious than the previous one. Not to mention anything else, just the number of talismans that made up this restriction was 129,600 more than the previous one. When it came to the last restriction, its complexity had reached an unimaginable level. Even Luo Fan, if he were to look at it with his own eyes, would feel dizzy and his vision blur because of the 36th restriction, and he would feel dizzy and dizzy. 86,313,600 talismans. This was the number of talismans composed of the 36th restriction. When this last restriction rushed straight into the first wood spirit, the first wood spirit suddenly burst out with an extremely strong yellow light. Along with this yellow light, there was a thump 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 thump. The sound of a heartbeat came from the center of the yellow light. Yang came out. There was a mysterious and indescribable feeling of mystery coming from the center of the yellow light. It was as if an earth-shattering existence was being nurtured within. Just when the yellow light reached its peak, it was like the sun shining through the entire dangling Jew palace. Because of the obstruction of the surrounding walls of the palace, it could not spread. It could only soar into the sky and form a light pillar. A little bit of green, full of vitality, appeared in the middle of the yellow light. When Yang appeared, it gradually dyed all the yellow light. After an unknown amount of time, the yellow light pillar that soared into the sky was dyed into a warm jade-like yellow-green. It was filled with endless mystery, and there was an endless sense of illusion coming from it. On the side of the yellow turban, the golden ring shines brilliantly. In the middle of the embroidered robe, the frost armor swallows the shadow of the moon. Always guarding the altar, every time I come to the world to subdue the devil. Suddenly, a deep and resounding voice resounded between heaven and earth. Along with this voice, the warm jade-like yellow-green light pillar that soared into the sky collapsed with a loud bang. It turned into specks of yellow-green light scattered in all directions and gradually disappeared between heaven and earth. At the same time, a big man slowly appeared in front of Luo Fan. This big man was about 10 feet tall. His skin was slightly yellow, and his forehead was wrapped with a yellow ribbon. He wore a silver sleeveless armor. His feet were bare, and he held a huge and heavy golden ring in his right hand. His muscles were bulging, and he was strong to the extreme. He stood there, mighty to the extreme. After this big man appeared, he knelt on the ground, bowed his body, and said, "The Yellow Turban Emperor greets Master." Luo Fan looked at the big man in front of him, whose appearance was completely different from A, B, C, D, the 10 yellow turban warriors. He nodded in his heart. Whether it was his appearance or strength, he was very satisfied. The 36 layers of restrictions were indeed not given for nothing. The strength of this yellow turban warrior was quite amazing. Just his strength alone was more than 100,000 pounds. He could also ride on the clouds, pass through mountains and cross the sea, and was impervious to water and fire. Just looking at his strength, he had already reached a critical point between achieving Tao fruit and not achieving Tao fruit. Precisely, his strength had already reached the super strength of a cultivator who was about to achieve Tao fruit. As for this yellow turban warrior with 36 layers of restrictions calling himself an emperor, Luo Fan did not have much of an opinion. At the very least, this yellow turban warrior was indeed the most powerful and mysterious existence among the yellow turban warriors. It was enough to be called an emperor. Chapter 43. Place these 10,000 talismans in your heart and refine a restriction. Luo Fan did not say much. He raised his hand and pointed, and a spiritual light shot out and rushed into the head of the yellow turban strongman emperor. This yellow turban strongman was a very mysterious existence. Although it was made of refining materials, energy, and restrictions, its body still had all the organs that a human body should have. However, the difference was that the composition of these organs was no longer the flesh and blood of ordinary people. Instead, they were composed of talismans and lines of energy. The spiritual light that Luo Fan transmitted into the head of the yellow turban strongman emperor contained tens of thousands of complicated and mysterious talismans, and there was a method to construct a restriction with these talismans. Among these talismans, 80% were comprehended by Luo Fan from the leaves of the strange tree. In addition, the remaining 20% were comprehended from various wonderful techniques in his memory. At that time, when Luo Fan first saw the strange tree, he found that the leaves of the strange tree were quite mysterious. The veins on the leaves actually formed an extremely complicated and mysterious talisman. The natural talisman on the leaves had the ability that Luo Fan needed at this time. It could absorb the free energy of the outside world and transform it into a kind of vitality energy that was infinitely beneficial to the body. This vitality energy was exactly what Hong Jun needed to go through the retribution. The natural talisman on the leaves was quite complicated. With the countless techniques in his memory as a reference, it was not difficult for Luo Fan to change this complicated talisman into a restriction. In particular, this talisman was originally composed of thousands of simple talismans. Just like a Chinese character was composed of several simpler Chinese characters. It was even easier to change it. After various modifications and creations, the restriction contained in the spiritual light that Luo Fan emitted had the power to absorb energy, transform energy, and open up space. As long as the yellow turban strongman emperor refined this restriction in his heart, he would be able to continuously convert energy from his body and the outside world into vitality energy and store it. He would also be able to open up a space of a certain size at the location of his heart. Apart from that, he could also turn his entire body invisible and attach himself to his master. The reason why Luo Fan didn't place this restriction on him earlier was because this restriction was very special. It would be too wasteful to refine it on him directly. As a matter of fact, the power of this restriction would increase with the increase of Ri during the sacrificial refining. In other words, as the refinement time increased, this restriction would produce more and more life energy, and the rate at which it was produced would also increase. Moreover, the space opened up would only grow larger and larger. One could imagine that if it was refined for an immeasurable amount of time, then this restriction would definitely become a boundless small world. With such a quality restriction, there was naturally no need to say how to choose the sacrificial refinement method. The yellow turban Hercules Emperor accepted this little bit of inspiration. His expression did not change, and his eyes did not change in the slightest. Without self-consciousness, he was just like a robot. No matter how strange and incredible the things he encountered, he would not be moved. After staying there for a while, the yellow turban Hercules Emperor was interpreting the inspiration from Luo Fan, and then said, "I will obey Master's order." Luo Fan shook his head slightly and said, "I am not your master. After 1,000 years, I will find another master for you." The yellow turban Hercules Emperor's voice remained unchanged. Yes. Luo Fan also knew that it was a waste of time to talk about feelings with the yellow turban Hercules Emperor. He raised his hand and moved through the void. The yellow turban Hercules Emperor had already disappeared. He was moved to a training room in the side hall of the Peak Hall. After the yellow turban Hercules Emperor came to the training room, he stood there with a dull expression. His eyes were closed, and his body began to emit layers of green light. These green lights were twisted and turbulent. There seemed to be countless mysterious lines appearing, disappearing, shuttling, and entangling. This was the yellow turban Hercules Emperor starting to refine the restriction in his heart. The 1,000 years that Luo Fan mentioned naturally referred to the time in this small world. If it was changed to the time of the untainted land, it was only equivalent to more than 2 years, less than 3 years. According to Luo Fan's calculations, by that time, it was almost time for Hongjun to cross the tribulation. Luo Fan's mind moved, and his mind reflected on the outside world. After observing for a while, he found nothing wrong, so he slowly retracted his perception and began to continue cultivating. Although it was easy to collect the essence of the first wood this time, it also exposed some of his weaknesses. For example, he used the magic power units to store the essence of the first wood, which was very inconvenient and cumbersome. It was completely undesirable. Originally, Luo Fan felt that there was such a boundless small world inside the Void Wuji Palace, so there was no need to worry about storage at all. With the Void Wuji Palace, even a mountain could contain it. But now, he knew how wrong this idea was. Although the Void Wuji Palace was his magic weapon, he could not always bring it with him. If he did not cultivate other magical powers and only used the magic power units to store things, it was both inconvenient and not elegant. The world in the sleeve seems to be good. Well, the moon in the chest seems to work. The world in the palm also has its advantages. Luo Fan rummaged through his memory and began to weigh the advantages and disadvantages of various spells. Pangu's original spirit was very dutiful. Before it dissipated, almost all the wonderful ideas in Luo Fan's memory were realized in various ways. After a careful examination, Luo Fan found that in his memory, there were as many as 36 spells to open up the void. Among them, each was very exquisite, had its advantages, but also had its weaknesses, making it really difficult to choose. The world in the sleeve. After rummaging for a while, Luo Fan, who could not decide, could only choose the most famous one at random, which was the magical power that first emerged in his memory. Thinking about it, if he were to take a fancy to something, all he had to do was spread out his sleeves, and the thing that was the size of a small mountain would be sucked into his sleeves, and the space in front of him would become as empty as a field. The world in the sleeve was a spell, a magical power, in which a large number of talismans were placed on one sleeve, and eventually a void of a certain size was opened up. The size of this created void would increase along with the refiner's cultivation. After the void was opened up, it could be controlled at will, and any dead things could be kept at will. It could also be kept in creatures that were weaker than cultivators. However, this kind of magic, this magical power, had a shortcoming, which was that it was extremely picky about the refining materials. If he wanted to increase its size, he would need to add some precious refining materials. It was not like the moon in the chest and the world in the palm, which didn't need any materials. As long as the body was healthy, it could be refined and expanded continuously. However, this was not a problem for Luo Fan. Luo Fan's black and brown robe was directly smashed and tempered by the cloud-shaped life formed by the Gung Jin divine thunder and Yi-Wood heavenly fire in the fourth layer of the astral wind, thunder and fire layer. It was said to be a robe, but it was actually a pure condensed energy. Its composition material was quite advanced. Although it was far inferior to the primordial chaos stone and the first wood, it was enough to open up a void on it. Luo Fan's mind moved, and countless talismans flowed through his mind and mind. They followed his mind and directly imprinted into his left sleeve. When these talismans were imprinted on it, the Gung Jin divine lightning and the Yi-Wood heavenly fire that formed the sleeve instantly collapsed, turning into a ball of black and brown clouds that covered his hand, covering his elbow to his wrist, then, the light flickered, and this large group of black and brown clouds shuttled and condensed, twisting and entangling. Finally, like silk woven into silk, it was woven into a sleeve that looked exactly the same as before. However, if one looked at it with the divine eyes that could see through the origin, they would find that the internal structure of the sleeve was completely different from before. The sleeve that was originally condensed into one was filled with thousands of complex and mysterious talismans. These talismans were intertwined, and finally opened up a space with a radius of 10,000 feet in this sleeve. Luo Fan's performance was very relaxed, as if nothing had happened. The sacrificial refining of the universe in the sleeve was not the slightest pressure for him, because he did not use any of his own strength at all. The opening of this void was entirely with the help of the energy of this sleeve. What Luo Fan consumed was at most a little bit of his mental strength. His mind moved slightly, and he secretly felt the space of the universe in the sleeve. Luo Fan could not help but sigh. It is a little small, but it is barely enough. Chapter 44. 1,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. When this happened, a powerful life force suddenly shot up into the sky. The life force shone with a dark green light and formed a pillar of light that shot up into the sky. Luo Fan opened his eyes that had been closed for 1,000 years. 2 golden lights flashed. Looking at the source of the light, he understood what was going on. It turned out that the Yellow Turban Emperor had spent 1,000 years to complete the sacrificial refining of the restriction. Moreover, all the energy in his body was transformed into boundless vitality. This beam of light was the scene of the eruption of the vitality energy. The Yellow Turban Emperor suddenly opened his eyes, raised his hands high, and roared. As he roared, the pillar of light in the sky that connected heaven and earth suddenly retracted. In the blink of an eye, it had completely retracted and entered his body. Luo Fan carefully perceived it, and already knew that there was a complicated restriction on the Yellow Turban Emperor's heart. The restriction was composed of tens of thousands of talismans. Every 2 talismans had a mysterious connection between them. When tens of thousands of talismans were combined, it was extremely complex and mysterious. Within the talisman was a space that was neither too big nor too small. It was 3,000 meters in circumference, and it was vast and desolate. However, it was completely empty, and it was like a vacuum. The first wood essence in the body of the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor had been completely transformed into green vitality energy under the heavy restriction of the heart. Its appearance seemed to be similar to the previous first wood essence, but its nature had completely changed. After the green vitality energy appeared, it flowed through the meridians of the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor. It was transformed, compressed, and condensed by the countless talismans wrapped around the meridians, becoming purer and more condensed. Luo Fan gently waved his hand, and the Yellow Turban Emperor was deterred by an invisible force. The Yellow Turban Emperor moved through the void and appeared in front of him in an instant. When the Yellow Turban Emperor saw Luo Fan, he cupped his hands and bowed, but did not speak. The Yellow Turban Emperor had been sacrificially refined to the 36th restriction. It was only one step away from becoming a magic treasure. It already had some intelligence, some thoughts, and some feelings. Although it had no self-consciousness, it could also be regarded as a living creature in some aspects. It could naturally accurately judge the situation and know when to speak and when not to speak. Luo Fan's thoughts cut into the body of the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor. With a thought, the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor turned into a dark green stream of air and rushed straight into his body. It exploded and swept through every part of his body, including every cell. It looked as if a membrane had been added to every part of his body and every cell. Whether it was his meridians, blood vessels, internal organs, muscles, or bones, nothing could escape from this membrane. Sensing the ability of this membrane, Luo Fan knew that this membrane had no defensive ability. Its function was more to repair those parts of the body after they were injured. Sure enough, as I expected. Although it had only one ability, Luo Fan was very satisfied. This was what he needed. A magic treasure for tribulation transcendence did not necessarily need to have a strong defensive ability. Tribulation was a process in which the energy in the body developed to a certain extent and triggered some kind of energy in the world, causing it to riot and cause it to attack the cultivator. This process was actually a process of tempering the energy in the body and the body itself. If he used an arcane artifact to defend against this attack and isolate it from his body, he would indeed be able to easily pass through the tribulation. However, the energy within his body and the body itself would lose a chance to temper and train. It would not be perfect. This was also the reason why Luo Fan could easily eliminate Hongjuan's tribulation, but he had to sacrifice the magic treasure for Hongjun to pass the tribulation. Luo Fan felt the power of this yellow turban Hercules Emperor and was very satisfied. With a thought, the membrane that covered every cell and every part of his body suddenly rushed out from all the acupuncture points in his body and left his body. In the blink of an eye, a yellow turban Hercules Emperor with a height of 3 meters condensed in front of him. Goddess E was calm and indifferent. 1,000 years had passed in the mini-kiliocosm, but it was less than 2 years and 9 months in the untainted land. After more than 2 years of trekking, Hongjun was no longer struggling in the 800-kilometer-wide river, with his speed that was faster than a galloping horse. This was for sure. Because the closer he was to Buzhou Mountain, the more complicated the terrain was. Therefore, in the past 2 years, Hongjuan's journey was not long. It was only 500,000 kilometers. He did not even run out of the range of Luo Fan's perception with the help of the Wuji Palace. At this time, Hongjun was standing at the top of a mountain, looking at the undulating land in front of him and the magnificent mountains and rivers. His chest was filled with endless pride. At this moment, he felt that he suddenly had a new understanding of Buzhou Mountain. At the same time, there was an inexplicable confidence in his heart, filling his heart. At this time, Hongjuan's face had a lot of dust. Although a few years of trekking had brought great benefits to him, it was more obvious on the outside than on the inside. If I hadn't met Master, how could I have today? Hongjun was excited. Although he had sealed his energy for 12 years, he could feel that his state of mind had made great progress, and he felt that the energy in his body had become nearly twice as pure and condensed. If he added some of the application methods in the indomitable heaven and earth technique that he had comprehended, his strength could at least be increased by more than 3 times. This was Hongjuan's confidence. With this understanding, he was naturally more grateful to his master who had arranged this journey. Every time he found out that he had made progress, he would be grateful to his master. This had almost become his habit. Suddenly, a very strange feeling appeared in Hongjuan's mind. This feeling was like a disaster was coming. What's going on? Hongjun was surprised and uncertain. For more than a yuan hui, he had been cultivating all the time, but this strange feeling had never appeared. He, who had no experience, naturally could not imagine what was going on. After 100, what will happen after 100? Hongjun pondered in his heart. After a little calculation, he vaguely understood when the disaster would come. At this time, it happened to be the moment when Luo Fan released the yellow turban Hercules Emperor. Wuji Boy carried out Luo Fan's order to protect Hongjun and immediately passed the change of Hongjuan's mind to Luo Fan. Perceiving this change, Luo Fan's face showed a faint smile. Have you comprehended it? He moved his mind, and the void Wuji Palace appeared above Hongjuan's head. Under the control of Wuji Boy, the void Wuji Palace had been floating above Hongjuan's head for more than 2 years, but it was hidden, so Hongjun could not find it. After the void Wuji Palace appeared, Luo Fan's figure flashed, and he had already left the spirit space. After leaving the void Wuji Palace, he floated in front of Hongjun, stepping on the void, looking elegant and chic. When Hongjun saw Luo Fan appear, he was shocked and quickly bowed. "Greetings, master." Luo Fan nodded, took a step, and came to the ground in front of Hongjun. He raised his hand, and Hongjun was lifted up by an invisible force. "No need to be so polite. Hongjun, my disciple, are you puzzled by the impending disaster?" Luo Fan smiled slightly. "That's right. Master, please dispel my doubts." Hongjun did not doubt that Luo Fan knew his thoughts, and he directly bowed to ask for advice. Chapter 45. This is predestination, also known as Heaven's Test. You have accumulated enough power now, but your realm is not enough, so you can't control your power perfectly. When you have the opportunity to break through, your power will have infinite vitality, and it will lead to the change of the power in the outside world, so it will become your predestination. If you get through it, your realm will improve greatly, and your power will increase greatly. If you can't get through it, you will die, and there will be no chance to redeem yourself, Luo Fan said calmly. Heaven's Test. Predestination. Hongjun didn't show any panic on his face. Instead, he was a little startled and stunned. After a while, he slowly clenched his fists, and his veins popped out. There was a strong sense of confidence in his eyes. "I already know. I will definitely get through the Heaven's Test after 100 Ri," he said firmly as he gradually exuded a sense of heroism. Luo Fan looked at Hongjun's performance, and he was very satisfied. Although the heaven's retribution that Hongjun's strength had attracted was definitely not 1/10,000th of his, it was extremely rare for Hongjun to be able to maintain such a strong fighting spirit in the face of impending disaster. It was enough to prove how strong his will was. However, he still had to try Hongjun. Luo Fan made up his mind. "I have a way to avoid this predestination. There is also a way to weaken this predestination. There is also a way to avoid this predestination. Disciple Hongjun, how are you going to survive this tribulation?" Luo Fan said with a smile. "I am willing to ask Master to teach me the way to resist the predestination." Hongjun didn't hesitate at all, and he said resolutely. When Luo Fan heard that, he couldn't help but laugh. He didn't expect Hongjun to be so strong-willed that he didn't choose the 3 methods that he gave, but asked to teach him the way to resist the predestination. "All right, since that's the case, I'll teach you a magic tool. Although the power of this magic artifact is not strong, it has the power to heal your injuries at any time. It is enough for you to survive this tribulation," said Luo Fan with a smile. As he spoke, he raised his hand and waved. A dark green light that emitted boundless vitality shot out from the Wuji Palace and landed on the ground in front of Hongjun. It gradually condensed into a shape and finally turned into an extremely strong man. It was the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor. This is the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor. It has 36 restrictions and is only one step away from becoming a magic treasure. You can work hard to refine it during this period of time. If you can reach the realm of becoming one with the artifact, then you can easily overcome this tribulation, Luo Fan said. The moment he grabbed the Yellow Turban Emperor, Luo Fan had already passed a thought to the Yellow Turban Emperor. At this time, the Yellow Turban Emperor did not wait for Luo Fan's instructions. It bowed to Hongjun and said, "Yellow Turban Emperor greets Master." Hongjun was slightly stunned at this moment. No matter how he looked at it, the Yellow Turban Emperor looked like a strong man. How could he tell that it was a magic artifact? However, he did not dare to doubt what his master said. Since his master said it was a magic artifact, then it must be a magic artifact. He could not tell because he was not knowledgeable enough. Therefore, after being stunned for a while, he quickly raised his hand and said sincerely to the Yellow Turban Emperor, "I look forward to your advice." The Yellow Turban Emperor nodded and turned into a dark green light that rushed straight to Hongjun's lower abdomen. In the blink of an eye, it entered. Seeing that the Yellow Turban Emperor had already entered, Luo Fan raised his right hand and pointed at Hongjun. A spiritual light penetrated Hongjuan's sea of consciousness and turned into countless complex words and images. It was a method to refine a magic artifact. It was very mysterious and profound. Only by using this method to refine the Yellow Turban Emperor could one completely refine it. At the same time, an invisible force acted on various parts of Hongjuan's body and easily broke the restriction that sealed his energy. In an instant, crackling sounds erupted from Hongjuan's body. A wave of mysterious energy suddenly rushed out from Hongjuan's lower abdomen and instantly filled every meridian in his body, filling them to the brim without any gap. Then, the energy rushed out of his meridian and out of his body through his acupuncture point. It dispersed around his body, causing his body to be shrouded in the mysterious energy and look a bit illusory. At this time, the Yellow Turban Emperor was like a dead object as it sat cross-legged in Hongjuan's lower abdomen. The rich energy around him was like an illusion. It passed through his body without any obstruction and could not affect him at all. After all, Hongjun had not refined the Yellow Turban Emperor yet. Naturally, he could not unleash its full power. It dispersed into a stream of energy that enveloped every cell and every part of his body. It was already very mysterious and special that the Yellow Turban Emperor could enter his dantian and stay there in such a situation. If it was an ordinary magic artifact, it would be impossible to enter his body before it was refined. Hongjun was in a very mysterious state at this time. Under the drive of the mysterious energy, his spirit became dazed, as if it was rising without limit. An indescribable feeling of comfort filled his mind. He had never felt his own power as directly as he did now, and he had never understood the nature of his power as clearly as he did now. Along with this feeling, an inexplicable understanding appeared in his mind. With the appearance of this understanding, he felt that his realm had improved a little. This improvement in realm also increased the purity of the energy in his body a little. The surging energy in his body gradually subsided, and Hongjuan's face gradually became calm. He slowly opened his eyes, and there seemed to be 2 flashes of light flashing through them. Everything calmed down, but Hongjun looked completely different from before. His body was constantly emitting strands of transparent energy. This energy accumulated and dissipated, causing his entire body to no longer have any dust or vicissitude. Instead, he looked elegant like an immortal. "Thank you for your help, Master." Hongjun bowed and thanked him. Just now, Luo Fan's finger was pointed out when Hongjun was unprepared. It was precisely because Hongjun was unprepared that his mind suffered an even greater impact, causing his mind to be completely stunned during the process of the energy explosion. Therefore, he could use the contrast between the 2 extremely short states of energy abundance and energy exhaustion to comprehend, and finally improve his realm. Without your hard work over the years, there would be no progress today. Luo Fan did not take credit but smiled and said, "Refining the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor will have 49. For the remaining time, you can sacrifice the embryo in your body, which can also increase the success rate of passing the tribulation." Hongjun bowed and replied, "Yes." Luo Fan nodded. Regardless of Hongjun, his figure flashed and went into the Wuji Palace. Hongjun did not leave. He directly sat cross-legged, closed his eyes, and began to refine the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor with the technique that Luo Fan imparted to his sea of consciousness. In his dantian, the mysterious energy accumulated and wrapped the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor. The energy that wrapped the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor twisted, condensed, elongated, and entangled at an extremely fast speed. Finally, it turned into mysterious talismans that were constantly imprinted into the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor's body, passing through layers of restrictions and reaching the core. With the imprinting of these talismans, a faint connection appeared between Hongjun and the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor, making Hongjun seem to be able to feel the heart of the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor and his feelings. This connection continued to strengthen and become closer with the increase of the imprinting talismans. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, it was already 100. As Luo Fan expected, it took Hong Jun a full 49 days to refine the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor. Chapter 46. After receiving the Yellow Turban Emperor, Hong Jun worked hard day and night. By the time he reached 49, he had completely refined it and branded himself in the deepest part of the core of the Yellow Turban Emperor. He was completely integrated with the core, and there was no distinction between them. At this point, the Yellow Turban Emperor had completely become his celestial device. Even Luo Fan could not take it away. After refining, all the power of the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor could be used by Hong Jun. He could change it into a tangible and intangible form with just a thought. He could also turn it into an energy that covered every part of his body and every cell. It could provide his body with a powerful vitality, so that he had an extremely terrifying self-healing ability and was almost immortal. Hong Jun even discovered a power that Luo Fan had not specifically designed. That was, he could actually use the Yellow Turban Emperor's incomparably rational and fast thinking to think about problems and deduce techniques. This was not a mistake on Luo Fan's part, nor was it Hong Jun's self-created power. It was because the Yellow Turban Emperor refined by Luo Fan had 36 restrictions. It was only one step away from becoming a magic weapon, which was equivalent to a cultivator who had achieved Dao fruit. This state was obviously higher than Hong Jun in terms of realm. Therefore, in Luo Fan's view, the Yellow Turban Emperor's thinking, and rationality were only ordinary and passable. It was not even half as good as the Limitless Boy. But for Hong Jun, that kind of thinking, and rationality were several times higher and stronger than him. With the help of the Yellow Turban Emperor to think about problems and deduce techniques, it was equivalent to improving his thinking, and rationality to the point where he was only one step away from achieving Dao fruit. The moment he became one with the Yellow Turban Emperor, Hong Jun was shocked by its power. Feeling the power of the immortal body, his admiration for Luo Fan almost exceeded that of Pangu the immortal body. This kind of power can actually be realized through a magic weapon, and this is only the power of the Yellow Turban Emperor at the level of a magic weapon. If the Yellow Turban Emperor becomes a magic weapon, what kind of power will it have? In this state of worship and admiration, Hong Jun began to refine the magical artifact embryo that he had been wearing for more than 10 years. After being constantly nourished by the mysterious energy in his body for more than 10 years, this magical tool embryo had already gained many mysteries. It was only missing the guidance of spells, talismans, and restrictive spells before it could become a real magical tool. Hong Jun, who already had an immortal body, had reduced his requirements for defense to a minimum. After using the thoughts and thinking of the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor, he decided to sacrifice this robe-shaped magical artifact embryo into an offensive magical artifact. The art of supporting heaven and earth contained 18 methods of application. These 18 methods of application were specially created by Luo Fan according to the nature of the art of supporting heaven and earth. They were most suitable for this cultivation method. If it was inserted into the artifact embryo, it would allow Hong Jun to unleash 120% of its power. In fact, there were no special requirements for the Dharma arts needed to refine a Dharma artifact. Almost any Dharma art could be used, be it for offense, defense, refining, formation, or cultivation. It was just that the power exerted by using different nature of the Dharma arts for sacrificial refining would be different. Hong Jun naturally did not worry about this kind of power. This Dharma art was specially created for him. No matter how strong or weak the Dharma artifact was, it would definitely be able to exert super powerful power in his hand. Therefore, he randomly chose and decided to directly insert 9 of the 18 methods of application into the magical artifact embryo. After that, He sacrificially refined it for 49 days before he finally succeeded. He let this magical artifact embryo break free from the cocoon and become a mysterious magical artifact. After becoming a magical artifact, this robe turned into a brocade handkerchief. Hong Jun named it 9-Spirit Cloud Light Handkerchief. It had 9 kinds of powers, such as flying, trapping and sealing, summoning thunder and fire, and blowing wind and turning into the sea. The power was so impressive that Hong Jun simply couldn't bear to put it down. For more than 10 days after the sacrificial refining was completed, he constantly familiarized himself with the power of this magical artifact in order to be able to use it to perfection. At this moment, it was already the 100th day after Luo Fan bestowed the magical artifact. It was also the time when the tribulation came. At noon, Hong Jun, who was meditating, was suddenly filled with an indescribable sense of danger and pressure. A strong sense of terror was transmitted into his godly soul, which made his godly soul tremble slightly. In the spirit space of the Wuji Palace, 100 years was 100 years. Luo Fan didn't do much in the 100 years. He was just immersed in his memory, looking through the various Dharma arts, and completing the Dharma arts that he had left behind in the past. Now he was getting more and more familiar with this kind of life with endless time. In the 100 years, what he had achieved was only completing the cultivation of a transformation Dharma art. At the moment when Hong Jun's heaven's tribulation came, Luo Fan suddenly had an idea. He pinched his fingers and calculated, then he knew that Hong Jun's tribulation was coming. His mind moved slightly, and his body was already out of the spirit space of the Wuji Palace. Standing in the void, he looked down at Hong Jun. 2 golden lights were emitted from his eyes and covered Hong Jun. In an instant, he had seen every change in Hong Jun from the inside to the outside, from the sea of consciousness to the tip of his hair. As I expected, the yellow turban strongman was refined to become one with the weapon in 49 years. Although there are some problems with the sacrificial refining method of this magic weapon, it is almost impossible to upgrade it to a magic weapon, but its power is quite good. Luo Fan secretly weighed in his heart. He was talking about the 9-Spirit Cloud Light Handkerchief. There was no problem with the Dharma arts that Hong Jun inserted into the 9-Spirit Cloud Light Handkerchief, but there was a big problem with the way he inserted it. This was because all he did was imbue these spells into it in one gulp. At most, he only controlled them slightly and allowed them to become one with the magic tool embryo. This kind of refining method caused the connection between the various Dharma arts to be very rough, and there were many flaws. Although at this time, the power of this magic weapon was quite strong, because of the flaws in it, it lost the possibility of going further. After RI, even if he added various materials for sacrificial refining and inserted more Dharma arts, he could only upgrade it to the peak of the magic weapon. It was impossible for it to produce spiritual awareness and become a magic weapon. The correct way was to break down and reorganize these Dharma arts, just like how Luo Fan refined the yellow turban strongman. He had to build layers of restrictions, then insert them into the magic weapon embryo, and fuse them with it. In that case, each Dharma art would be closely related to the magic weapon materials and other Dharma arts, forming an organic and mysterious whole. Those flaws would naturally not exist. Only in this way, this magic weapon had the possibility of becoming a magic weapon. However, these were all small problems, and there was a way to make up for it after RI. Luo Fan didn't think it was a big deal, so he just pretended not to know and didn't correct him. His eyes flashed, and the 2 golden lights disappeared. His vision had returned to normal. Long live Master. Seeing Luo Fan appear, Hong Jun bowed. No need to be so polite. Your heaven's retribution this time is the Gung Metal Lightning Fire Retribution. It will last for 6 hours. The power is quite impressive for you, so you need to be careful. Luo Fan nodded and advised. With Luo Fan's realm, at this moment, Hongjuan's heaven's retribution was no longer a secret to him. Gung metal lightning fire. Hongjun repeated. After a while, he said, "Thank you for your guidance, master." With Luo Fan's guidance, he already knew how to deal with this heaven's retribution. Just as Hongjun finished speaking, an invisible vortex suddenly appeared above Hongjun's head, and an extremely terrifying aura came out from it. The first retribution of Hongjun's Dao fruit, the Gung metal lightning fire retribution, had arrived. Chapter 47. After the invisible whirlpool appeared, it expanded rapidly and became more and more obvious and terrifying. A sense of extreme danger appeared in Hongjuan's heart, causing his body to almost tremble uncontrollably. Even Luo Fan, who hadn't left yet, felt a sense of impending danger enveloping him, telling him that if he didn't leave, he would suffer endless blows. Although he didn't care about this endless blow, this was Hongjuan's tribulation after all. Luo Fan didn't want to turn the tables. He moved his mind and the infinite void palace turned into a purple-yellow light. With a roll, it wrapped around his body. With another flash, it had already taken him out of the range of the heaven's retribution. Suspended in the void, Luo Fan's heart was filled with interest. After all, this was the first time he watched someone go through the heaven's retribution. Even if Luo Fan had seen through the true face of the heaven's retribution and even calculated the entire process of the heaven's retribution, he couldn't suppress the curiosity in his heart. After Luo Fan left, all the power of the heaven's retribution was added to Hongjuan's body. The terrifying feeling of impending disaster and the arrival of a mountain rain became even more intense and obvious. In the blink of an eye, the whirlpool had already expanded to a radius of 100 acres. Almost half of the mountain was covered in it. The sunlight that shone down from the sky was distorted by the whirlpool, causing most of the mountain to look a little illusory. Suddenly, a golden light appeared in the center of the whirlpool. After this golden light appeared, it expanded at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it had already filled the entire whirlpool, causing the originally illusory and formless whirlpool to become solid, turning into a sea of gold. This golden light was extremely intense and tyrannical. It fluctuated wildly in the entire whirlpool, twisting and flowing. Luo Fan looked at it from the side and knew that the whirlpool had already twisted the space, forming a very strange spatial fault that connected to the astral wind, thunder and fire layer in the sky. And that golden light was the incomparably pure Gung Jin divine thunder. It even leads to the first layer of the astral wind, thunder and fire layer. As expected, Luo Fan thought to himself. At this time, Hongjun didn't have Luo Fan's leisurely mood. The moment the Gung Jin divine thunder appeared, he felt that the feeling of impending disaster was extremely strong and terrifying to the extreme. His entire body couldn't help but tremble. An incomparably heavy pressure acted on every part of his body, like invisible shackles, locking up his entire body, locking up every cell in his body. It was impossible for him to even move an inch. This is the heavenly tribulation. This is 1/10,000th of the power of the heavenly tribulation that Master once encountered. It's too powerful. This thought flashed through Hongjuan's mind. However, it was only a flash. At this moment, he no longer had any spare energy to grieve for the autumn. Kacha! An incomparably terrifying and massive explosion resounded from within the golden light, shaking the surrounding heavens and earth. Then, a golden thread the size of a thumb emerged from the vortex. In the blink of an eye, it crossed a distance of 1,000 feet. Before Hongjun could react, it had already hit his head. The Gung Jin divine thunder was extremely strong, fierce, brilliant, and sharp. When this thumb-sized Gung Jin divine thunder hit his head, it instantly swept through every part of Hongjun's body. Every cell turned into countless tiny needles and sharp swords that pierced into every cell. With a soft sound, wisps of smoke were emitted from Hongjun's body. These cells were unable to withstand the bombardment of the Gung Jin divine lightning at all. They were instantly blasted apart, and the various substances within turned invisible and evaporated. Fortunately, before this, Hong Jun had already become one with the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor. The vitality energy of the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor had already enveloped every cell of his. The moment the cells were broken, the vitality energy that covered his whole body instantly separated and integrated into the cells. In the blink of an eye, the cells recovered. Moreover, the recovered cells seemed to be stronger than before, just a tiny bit more than before. The whole process was extremely fast. Almost as soon as the cells were broken, they were restored by the vitality energy. However, the pain caused by the process didn't weaken at all. The moment the Gung Jin Divine Thunder entered his body, Hong Jun felt as if his body was instantly crushed, and his entire divine soul suffered a strong impact. Although this impact didn't reach the intensity of the protection of the innate inextinguishable spiritual light, it still made him feel very uncomfortable and almost unbearable. With the appearance of this Gung Jin Divine Thunder, the sound of crackling continued. The huge golden vortex was like rain, pouring out countless golden threads of divine thunder. Like a funnel, it directly hit Hong Jun's body and integrated into it, destroying everything it could and killing everything it could. Hong Jun sat cross-legged. He didn't use his power to resist, nor did he take out his magic treasure to resist. He just looked up at the sky and endured the waves of lightning bombardment with his physical body. Every time a ray of lightning entered his body, he experienced the pain of his body being crushed and reassembled. Every time lightning entered his body, he felt that his body was strengthened a little. The Gung Jin Divine Thunder that struck down from the sky became stronger and stronger, more condensed, and more powerful. In less than 2 hours, the Gung Jin Divine Thunder had already grown to the size of pillars. It descended from the sky and enveloped Hongjuan's entire body within it. The extremely strong Gung Jin Divine Thunder could not only hurt the physical body, but it could also attack the divine soul. Unknowingly, the Gung Jin Divine Thunder had already broken through the barrier between the physical body and the divine soul. Every time, a trace of Gung Jin Divine Thunder, through some mysterious mechanism, rushed straight into Hong Jun's sea of consciousness, wreaking havoc, stirring, and constantly attacking his divine soul. Under the protection of the innate inextinguishable spiritual light, Hong Jun's divine soul was not in any danger of collapsing, but that was all. The pain of the Gung Jin Divine Thunder hitting his divine soul did not weaken at all. More and more divine thunder struck his body, and the pain of his divine soul became more and more intense and terrifying. All of a sudden, the golden vortex in the sky underwent an abrupt change. A white light was produced from the center of the vortex and gradually spread. In a breath's time, it engulfed the entire 100-acre vortex. The entire golden vortex, which was originally shining with golden and white light, was dazzling, as if it had turned into a sea of fire. It looked very gorgeous. At the same time, a wave of heat descended from the sky, enveloping Hong Jun and roasting his body. Then, countless pillar-sized, golden and white light rays fell from the sky and hit Hong Jun's head, instantly engulfing his entire body. Fire! Hong Jun received these light rays, and this word suddenly flashed in his mind. At the same time, a burning feeling emerged from all parts of his body, engulfing every cell in his body. His cells, which were already used to the bombardment of the Gung Jin Divine Thunder, were instantly turned into charcoal. An indescribable pain was transmitted from all over his body to his mind. His sea of consciousness turned into a sea of gold and white fire at that moment. It was extremely hot and extremely dangerous. The burning flames and the surrounding golden light fused with each other, entangled with each other, and constantly erupted with power several times more than before, bombarding his divine soul. His entire divine soul was instantly wrapped in white flames, turning into a white flaming man. Gung Jin Lightning Fire Tribulation. So that's how it is. Hong Jun instantly understood what was going on. The self-healing ability that the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor gave him was quite amazing. Even if there was such a sudden and rapid change, he could react in an instant and repair his body. After the thunder fire bombarded him, in the blink of an eye, all the cells in his body had completely returned to normal. Furthermore, after his body was repaired this time, the extent of his improvement was a little greater than before. The sea of fire in this sea of consciousness was so strong, but it finally triggered the innate inextinguishable spiritual light above. In other words, Hong Jun's divine soul could no longer withstand such intense thunder fire tempering. At the moment when the white flames and golden light entangled Hong Jun's divine soul, the innate inextinguishable spiritual light turned and absorbed all the flames that entangled his divine soul into it, disappearing into nothingness. This change made the divine soul, which had been feeling pain all the time, suddenly feel refreshed. At this moment, Hong Jun understood that he could no longer use heaven's retribution to temper his divine soul without any resistance. He had to use a magic weapon to weaken the thunder fire in order to achieve the tempering effect. He suddenly moved his mind, and the robe on his body turned into a brocade handkerchief that rushed up. In an instant it expanded to the size of 100 acres. As if covering the sky and earth, it completely enveloped the 100-acre whirlpool above. Then, it was the 9-spirit cloud light handkerchief that Hong Jun had refined into 49 ri. After this brocade handkerchief wrapped around the whirlpool, it suddenly changed into a 100-acre lake. The endless lake water floated above the void, surging, bursting out with an earth-shattering momentum, and rushed straight to the huge whirlpool. At the same time, traces of purple lightning entangled every wave of the lake, like thunder, tyrannical, facing the Gung Jin divine thunder and white heavenly fire that descended from the sky. This 9-spirit cloud light handkerchief was integrated with 9 spells, and it had 9 kinds of power. What Hong Jun relied on was the law of the mutual restraint of water and fire, and the repulsion of the same. Originally, I wanted to write more about Hong Jun's retribution tribulation in more detail, and also integrate some of my ideas into it. But after thinking about it, there shouldn't be too many people who want to see Hong Jun's retribution tribulation for too long, and not too many people want to see the main character disappear for too long, so I gave up. The next chapter is called Invisible Rune Ghost. Chapter 48. The power of this lake surrounded by lightning was amazing, but it did not completely offset the heavens' retribution. It only weakened the Gung Jin divine thunder and white heavenly fire a little, but there were still countless lightning and heavenly fire that penetrated the barrier of the lake and hit Hong Jun directly. It was not that the power of this celestial device was not enough, but the result of Hong Jun's deliberate control. Although the heavens' retribution was extremely dangerous, and if one was not careful, it might be beyond redemption. But at the same time, it also had a great opportunity. If used well, it was enough to improve his strength. Hong Jun opened his eyes wide and looked up at the sky. The lightning and flames hit his body, making him seem to have an extra golden armor. There were even white flames burning on it, burning the surrounding primordial chi. The weakened Gung Jin divine thunder and white heavenly fire were still amazing, and they could still cause great damage to his body and soul. But it had been weakened to the extent that he could bear. The Gung metal divine thunder and white heavenly fire struck down from the sky like a torrential rain, densely packed, penetrating the lake that was entwined with lightning. It seemed to have weakened a lot, but it was only a little less. The scene was still shocking. They struck Hong Jun's body and penetrated in without any resistance. Not only did they sweep through every cell of his body, but they also rushed into his sea of consciousness through a mysterious mechanism. After being weakened by the 9-spirit cloud light handkerchief, the power of the Gung Jin divine thunder and white heavenly fire had weakened to the extent that they could not trigger the innate inextinguishable spiritual light. They impacted his soul, causing his soul to feel endless pain while being tempered. Needless to say, The Gung Jin divine thunder and white heavenly fire that swept through every cell of his body were constantly repaired by the yellow turban Hercules Emperor and constantly improve. Luo Fan looked at the scene of Hongjuan's retribution and could not help but nod secretly. Hongjun used the celestial device to weaken the power of the heavens' retribution. Although the timing was not perfect, it was still decisive. It was enough to show his firm will and accurate judgment. Suddenly, Luo Fan's blood rushed to his head. The yin-yang test method didn't need him to think about it. It directly flowed through his mind, and a mysterious secret flashed in front of his eyes. You want to take advantage of me? Luo Fan calculated and grasped that bit of heaven's secret. He already understood what was going on, and he couldn't help but feel angry. After the previous observation, he already had an understanding of Hongjuan's strength and wisdom, so he was not worried that Hongjun would not be able to survive the Gungjin thunder and fire tribulation this time. At this moment, he knew that something was coming to take advantage of him, but he could already split his energy to deal with it, and he didn't need to stay by Hongjuan's side to protect. After making up his mind, he shouted, "Where is the Wuji boy?" A light flashed in the void, and a fair-skinned boy appeared out of thin air in front of Luo Fan. He bowed and waited for Luo Fan's instructions. "Keep an eye on Gu Hongjun. Don't let his life be in danger." Luo Fan didn't waste any time and directly instructed. "Understood." Wuji boy bowed and replied expressionlessly. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure turned illusory and turned into a ray of golden light. He suddenly rushed forward and merged with the purplish-yellow light. He was reintegrated into the Wuji Palace of Void. After Luo Fan finished instructing, he looked at Hongjun again, and his figure flashed. He turned into a long rainbow and rushed to the mountain peak where Hongjun was. At the moment when he entered the mountain, he used the earth escape technique, and his figure was like a fish in the water. After that, like a fish swimming at the bottom of the water, he sank to the ground easily. 1,800 miles. Luo Fan's destination, which was the existence that intended to take advantage of him, was located 1,800 miles underground. This distance had exceeded the perception range of Luo Fan with the help of the Wuji Palace of Void to enhance his perception. If it was a normal day, Luo Fan definitely wouldn't find out the abnormal situation there. But now, with the help of the yin-yang measurement method, which was a mysterious technique to calculate the mysteries of heaven, he could find out the abnormal situation at that location. He knew that something was quickly shuttling to the location of Hongjuan's tribulation with malice. This wasn't Hongjuan's tribulation. Luo Fan had already understood this point after many calculations. Hence, he interfered to deal with this existence, regardless of Hongjuan's tribulation that needed training. The distance of 1,800 miles wasn't too far for Luo Fan. If he was on the ground, he could cross it in a blink of an eye. But it was different underground. It was dozens of times harder to move underground than on the ground. Even with the earth escape technique, it took Luo Fan a long time to get to the 1,500 miles. At this time, he happened to meet the existence that was rushing to Hongjuan's position with malice. Luo Fan took a long time to sink 1,500 miles. The existence that was full of malice was not slow. In a short while, it had floated more than 150 miles. What is this? Luo Fan could not help but be slightly surprised when he saw that thing clearly. Although he knew that there was something full of malice that wanted to take advantage of him, he didn't know what it was, nor did he know what it looked like. At this time, it was the first time that he saw it. It was also the first time that he knew that there was such a strange existence in this world. He couldn't see what it was at all. Neither the countless legends and the memories he brought from Earth nor the common sense that Pangu's original spirit left in his head based on the actual situation in the primordial world told him what the thing in front of him, which was emitting a strong yin and turbid air, was and what characteristics it had. Ga. The continuous strange laughter passed through the layers and entered Luo Fan's ears. That existence was a very strange mass of matter, like an ink crystal. It changed constantly and was ethereal and invisible. Sometimes it turned into a stone with sharp edges, sometimes it turned into a swimming fish in the water, sometimes it turned into a stable and motionless grass, and sometimes it turned into a strange and ferocious beast. There were all kinds of strange and unpredictable changes. The speed of its changes was so fast that hundreds of changes appeared in almost every breath. Although he didn't know what this existence was, Luo Fan knew that it was a kind of living creature. It was a kind of living creature that was different from the innate gods and the cloud-shaped living creatures in the Gangfeng Lei fire layer, because this existence exuded a malice that even the slowest person could discover. And only living creatures would have malice. When Luo Fan saw the monster clearly, the monster also saw him clearly. Amidst the strange cackling, the monster's body rapidly changed, abandoning its previous transformations, and gradually turned into a jet-black, lifelike Luo Fan. Even the tiniest muscle lines were identical to Luo Fan's. Imitation? At this time, the anger in Luo Fan's heart had disappeared. Instead, he became interested, because he had found that although this monster was strange, its power was very low, even far less than that of Hong Jun. To him, it was not a threat at all. The eyes of the ink crystal Luo Fan flashed with a deep light. It looked dull and crazy. It laughed strangely, opened its arms and pounced on Luo Fan. This monster was perfectly integrated with the surrounding earth. Its body in the earth was like a fish in the water. It was relaxed and not blocked at all. Instead, it seemed to be able to use the surrounding earth to provide a faster speed and a stronger impact. Luo Fan was using the Earth Escape supernatural power. Under this supernatural power, his body turned into a very strange state. This state made him almost integrated with the Earth. There was no distinction between them, and no physical object could touch him. However, when the monster pounced on him, he actually felt an invisible strong wind blowing on his face, causing his hair and clothes to flutter backward. At this moment, Luo Fan understood that this monster could touch him in this state and hurt him in this state. This made Luo Fan secretly vigilant. He no longer had the thought of playing with this monster. He raised his hand and an invisible force instantly appeared around the monster. It instantly locked the monster's entire body, making it unable to even move a finger. The monster god became extremely crazy. The ferocious god was like a devil. It was no longer letting out strange laughter, but continuous angry roars. Its body also began to fluctuate and change shape. From the looks of it, it seemed like it could no longer maintain its original form and wanted to change into another form. Looking at the monster that looked like him showing such a crazy and ferocious side, Luo Fan could not help but feel a little strange. With a slight thought, he clenched his hand slightly, and the monster instantly collapsed. It turned into a ball of black smoke with a diameter of 1 meter. It was covered by an invisible spherical area, causing it to turn into a sphere and crazily surge and collide. Shrill screams came from it. It was extremely horrifying. A mantra suddenly flowed in Luo Fan's mind. In an instant, 2 golden lights shot out from his eyes, completely covering the smoke. In an instant, the appearance of the smoke was stripped away, and its origin was illuminated. So it's the invisible rune ghost. How wonderful! In an instant, Luo Fan already understood what this monster was. As for the name of the invisible rune ghost, it came from the origin of this thing. It was like a label, and it was not named by Luo Fan himself. The core origin of this invisible rune ghost was nothing else but a complex 3-dimensional rune. Chapter 49. This 3-dimensional rune was spherical, fist-sized, and dark. Its color was several times deeper than the surrounding black mist. The entire spherical rune was formed by hundreds of deep and tough energy lines. It looked very simple, but it was also very mysterious. It had a different kind of mystery. It flowed rapidly and changed constantly. It was very mysterious. Heavy turbid rune. I see. Luo Fan looked at the spherical rune and inexplicably understood it. He instantly knew the name of the spherical rune. This heavy turbid rune was the core of the invisible talisman ghost. It was also the place where the invisible talisman ghost's spiritual sense was located, and it was also the place where its memories were stored. Luo Fan could see through the origin and instantly saw through the nature of this heavy turbid rune. With a thought, the memories of the invisible talisman ghost flowed through his mind and mind. He casually looked through them like a movie. So there is such a mysterious existence under the primordial world. As he looked through the memories contained in the heavy turbid rune, Luo Fan could not help but be shocked. Through these memories, he found that there was a huge river that was thousands of miles wide, 4,900 miles underground. The water in this river was completely condensed from the extremely turbid qi, and was turbid yellow in color. It meandered and flowed gently. It flowed out of nowhere and stayed in an unknown place. In this river, there were endless invisible talisman ghosts. These invisible talisman ghosts fought and devoured each other in this river, constantly growing and strengthening. Yellow Spring. This was the Yellow Spring. Through the memories of the invisible talisman ghost, Luo Fan found that only the name Yellow Spring could match this river. Only the meaning contained in this name could describe the nature of this river. Invisible talisman ghost, Yellow Spring, heavy turbid qi. There are actually such strange things in this world. I wonder if those invisible talisman ghosts are like this one. They only know how to kill, can't communicate, and don't have a complete spiritual sense. Luo Fan's eyes sparkled. He was very interested. After arriving in the primordial world, Luo Fan's mentality had long changed. At this moment, he only wished to see everything clearly in the world and observe the various changes in the primordial world. Through these observations, he would ceaselessly improve his cultivation, and in the end, attain the supreme fruit of the Tao and step onto the peak of the world. Now that he discovered such a strange yellow spring with such a strange formless talisman ghost, how could he not be interested? With a thought, he raised his right hand and clenched it. The invisible talisman ghost that was restrained instantly collapsed. Countless black mist spurted out from the black sphere, and an incomparably mournful scream came from it, rushing straight into Luo Fan's eardrums. Soon, all the black mist dissipated, revealing a simple and profound spherical rune. That was the formless talisman ghost that he had destroyed, leaving behind only this heavy turbid talisman, which was the core of the formless talisman ghost. With a wave of his left hand, Luo Fan spread out his sleeve and absorbed the heavy turbid talisman into the void created by his sleeve universe. His posture looked extremely carefree. Although he still did not know what the heavy turbid talisman was used for, Luo Fan knew that it would definitely be of great use, and it must be extremely precious. At least, it would not be inferior to the earth essence that he used to refine the Wuji Palace. Naturally, he would not let go of such a treasure. After collecting the heavy turbid talisman, Luo Fan didn't hesitate. His figure rushed down at an extremely fast speed towards the place he was very interested in, the Yellow Spring that was 4,900 miles underground. At this moment, Luo Fan did not know how thick the earth of the primordial world was. However, he found that the ground was simply a treasure. Moreover, it was a treasure with endless treasures. There were the essence of the 5 elements, the evil qi, the earth fire, the ores, and so on. There were even countless chaotic energy sources of various sizes lying quietly in various parts of the ground, waiting to be excavated and released. The deeper he went underground, the more treasures there were. Although there were all kinds of treasures in the ground to a depth of 1,500 miles, there were not too many of them, and they were not very densely distributed. In addition, Luo Fan did not pay attention to them, so he did not feel much. However, when he went 3,000 miles underground, a rare refining material would appear almost every few hundred feet, and an existence that would absolutely be regarded as a priceless treasure in the future would be placed in front of Luo Fan. At first, Luo Fan was very excited. He collected every one that he encountered, and every one that he found, he collected it. In less than 1,000 miles, he had already filled the void created by his sleeve universe. When the void was filled, he realized that his actions were really unnecessary. He did not believe that this randomly chosen mountain peak was in a special position, and he did not believe that the number of treasures here was much more than in other places. It seemed that the situation was similar in the underground of the entire primordial world. If he wanted to use these materials and treasures, he could choose a random place and go underground to get them. Why did he have to go through so much trouble to collect them? This way of doing things was too stingy. With this thought in mind, Luo Fan shook his head and gave up this method. He no longer cared about the refining materials and all kinds of treasures around him, and rushed straight into the ground at full speed. In a short while, he had already reached a depth of 4,900 miles underground, and finally saw the yellow spring that existed in the memory of the invisible talisman ghost. Seeing the yellow spring, Luo Fan was completely shocked. A yellow river, thousands of miles wide and millions of miles long, flowed before his eyes. That magnificent scene rushed straight into his mind, causing him to tremble uncontrollably. This yellow spring was surrounded by a layer of earthy yellow light shield, completely isolating it from the surrounding ground. This light shield was composed of extremely pure and condensed earth essence. It was thick, gentle, and tough, and at this moment the position facing Luo Fan, which was perpendicular to the mountain peak, seemed to be a little weak. At least, it was much weaker than other places. When Luo Fan looked at it, there were tens of thousands of ever-changing invisible talisman ghosts madly attacking the weak position, one after another, and the weak position was shaky. With a move of his mind, the mantra of the yin and yang calculation method flowed through his mind. Luo Fan pinched his fingers and calculated. In the blink of an eye, he knew that this weak position was caused by Hongjun, who was 4,900 miles above him, undergoing the tribulation. A mysterious connection appeared between the netherworld and Hongjun. As a result of this connection, it was as if there was an invisible force that was constantly weakening the earth energy shield. Suddenly, there was a crisp sound. The weak position suddenly collapsed, and a small hole with a diameter of 1 foot appeared. An invisible talisman ghost laughed strangely, rushed out of the small hole, and rushed up quickly. As the invisible talisman ghost rushed out, the hole instantly closed, and returned to its previous thickness, blocking the other talisman ghosts that were planning to follow the invisible talisman ghost and rush up. With one look, Luo Fan knew where the invisible talisman ghost that he had destroyed before came from. Seeing that the talisman ghost had turned into his own appearance, Luo Fan shook his head slightly, raised his hand, and the invisible talisman ghost instantly collapsed. The black fog dispersed, and turned into a heavy yin talisman the size of a fist. After a careful look, he found that this heavy yin talisman seemed to be a little simpler than the previous one. Chapter 50. It seems like the invisible talisman ghosts are differentiated by the complexity of the heavy turbid yin talisman. Luo Fan understood. With a wave of his left hand, he covered the fist-sized heavy turbid yin talisman and put it into the void created by the sleeve universe. He didn't stop. After putting it into the yin talisman, his figure flashed and rushed into the chi of the earth. The chi of the earth was so tough and impenetrable to the invisible talisman ghosts, but to Luo Fan, it was like a water curtain that couldn't stop him at all. The chi of the earth was the origin chi of the earth. The earth escape technique allowed him to move in the earth. He could move and swim. It wasn't a big deal for him to pass through the chi of the earth. Once he entered the yellow spring, he was instantly submerged by the spring water. The earth escape technique lost its effect completely, and his body became solid again. At the same time, there was an endless cold and turbid aura that wrapped around him, making him feel extremely cold. He felt as if his body was being pressed down by a mountain. The entire yellow spring was filled with the pure spring water that was condensed from the endless heavy, turbid and extreme yin qi. This spring water had an extremely strong corrosive effect on the body. After entering it for a few breaths, Luo Fan felt his body go numb and numb. His agility was greatly reduced. He couldn't help but be shocked. The earth immortal Tao fruit in his body shook and rolled a few times. An invisible membrane appeared on the surface of his body, isolating him from the surrounding yellow spring water. At this point, Luo Fan felt his body return to normal. Although the invisible talisman ghosts were endless, they were insignificant compared to the yellow spring. In addition, the place where Luo Fan entered was a few miles away from the weak spot. Therefore, no invisible talisman ghost discovered Luo Fan's existence for a long time. The formless talisman ghosts within 100 miles were still attacking the weak point, as if they were desperate to escape from the yellow springs. This heavy and turbid qi of extreme yin seems to counteract innate vital qi and chaotic vital qi, and it's even to the extent that innate Taoism constitution can't withstand it. It's truly marvelous. Luo Fan sensed the quality of the nether spring's water and pondered in his heart. At this moment, the sounds in the surroundings stopped. It became unimaginably quiet. Only faint strange laughter, roars, and screams could be faintly heard in the distance. Luo Fan looked around in surprise, only to find that tens of thousands of shapeless rune ghosts were staring at him from a few miles away. Moreover, the form of each invisible rune ghost was gradually changing at the same time. Soon, countless black jades piled up and formed the shape of Luo Fan. Their appearances were vivid and lifelike. Even the most minute patterns on their skin and the style of their hair were the same. The only difference was that their expressions were incomparably malevolent, crazy, and even somewhat lifeless. Luo Fan sighed. Fighting with these formless talisman ghosts that could transform into his own form really didn't feel good. At this moment, the formless talisman ghosts had all taken their forms. They let out strange cackles and pounced toward Luo Fan. Fine, I also need more heavy and turbid yin talismans to study. Since you've come to me, don't blame me. Luo Fan sighed and waved his hand lightly. An invisible force was produced and acted on the formless talisman ghost. Puff, 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 a series of muffled sounds rang out, and the surrounding yellow springs water surged. Ripples were produced one after another, and wave after wave of waves surged. Boundless black mist burst out, and one after another, the formless talisman ghosts were crushed by that formless force and turned into source energy. They dispersed in all directions, and in the end, they were stirred up by the yellow springs water in the surroundings, and with a single breath, they fused into it. Luo Fan didn't use any magic arts. He just relied on his body's innate magical power and instinct after attaining the earthly immortal's Tao fruit and attaining the connate Taoist aptitude. It was enough to deal with these invisible talisman ghosts. The gap between the invisible talisman ghosts and Luo Fan was too big with this movement. Countless incomparably shrill screams came from where the formless talisman ghosts were, and rushed straight into Luo Fan's ears. Hearing these shrill screams, Luo Fan didn't move at all. His expression was as calm as ever, and his movements didn't have the slightest hesitation. These formless talisman ghosts only knew how to kill and devour each other. Although they could be called living beings, they didn't have a complete spiritual consciousness. They couldn't even compare to the yellow-turbaned strongman who had only refined one layer of restrictions. He didn't feel the slightest psychological pressure in killing them. Although the formless talisman ghosts were black in color, their essence was also heavy yin qi. It was only through some kind of wonderful change, through special compression and purification, that it appeared to be different from the surrounding spring water. At this time, after being blasted by Luo Fan, its body automatically returned to its origin, and naturally integrated into the spring water. After a while, the tens of thousands of talisman ghosts that pounced over disappeared completely. They turned into tens of thousands of heavy talismans and stayed where they were, quietly floating there. Luo Fan took a look and found that there were no fish that had escaped the net. With a wave of his left hand, he opened his big sleeve and covered the tens of thousands of heavy talismans, and put them into the void created by the sleeve universe. Although he had collected a lot of refining materials along the way and had already filled the void, there were some gaps between the various materials, and it was enough to store the tens of thousands of fist-sized heavy talismans. As the surrounding formless talisman ghosts were cleaned up, the surrounding area of more than 100 miles became very quiet, and there were no more formless talisman ghosts. Only more than 100 miles away could he see a sparse number of formless talisman ghosts shuttling back and forth unconsciously, killing. The sleeve universe is still too small. It's a little difficult to store the heavy talismans now. Since I collected so many materials previously, I can refine it again and expand the void by a few times. Luo Fan thought to himself. With this thought, the Dharma power in his body shook, and an invisible force suddenly erupted from his body, forcing the surrounding spring water away, forming a spherical vacuum area with a radius of 100 feet around his body. Although he could also refine it in the spring water, it was not as easy as in the outside world. With a thought, in the void of the sleeve universe, a 5-foot-wide greenish-brown north wind raw stone suddenly shook, broke out of the void, and appeared in front of Luo Fan. The materials that Luo Fan used to refine the sleeve universe last time were Gungjin Divine Thunder and Imu Heavenly Fire. They were all pure materials collected from the astral wind lightning fire layer. Although they seemed to be everywhere in the untainted land, they were still very precious. The wind helped the fire, and the fire borrowed the wind. Thunder and fire complemented each other, and wind and thunder generated each other. If he wanted to use new materials to expand the void, the most suitable thing was wind. Therefore, using this north wind raw stone to refine the sleeve universe could achieve the best effect. With this thought in mind, the sleeve universe mantra flowed in his mind. Then, his left sleeve instantly shook and collapsed, turning into a large black and brown cloud. Countless talismans flashed and shuttled back and forth in the cloud. At this moment, the strange laughter became louder and louder, reaching Luo Fan's ears. Luo Fan looked out and saw the formless talisman ghosts 100 miles away madly rushing towards Luo Fan's position as if they had taken stimulants. Looking at the momentum, it was even crazier than when the formless talisman ghosts attacked the chi of the earth. Countless thoughts flashed in Luo Fan's mind. In the end, he smiled helplessly. It turns out that these formless talisman ghosts were attracted by the Gungjin Divine Thunder, although he still did not know why these formless talisman ghosts were so eager for the Gungjin Divine Thunder. It was not the time to delve into it. He waved his left hand, and the grayish-brown cloud flashing with countless talismans suddenly shrouded the north wind raw stone, instantly swallowing it. Crack, 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 with a crisp sound, black smoke constantly rose from it and rushed into the spring water above. It was washed by the spring water, and finally turned into small balls of sand and stones. The spring water rushed and swayed, and then it sank to the bottom of the spring. Chapter 51. At this moment, the invisible talisman ghosts that were rushing over had already reached Luo Fan. Boom, boom, boom. The moment the invisible talisman ghosts got close to Luo Fan, they collided with the invisible force. In that moment, massive explosions sounded out from all directions as the formless talisman ghosts exploded one by one, creating incredibly powerful shockwaves that shook the surrounding yellow spring water and caused intense waves to ripple. These invisible evil spirits looked ferocious, but they were much weaker than Luo Fan. They couldn't even withstand the invisible force released by Luo Fan. After colliding with this layer of invisible force, it instantly collapsed and scattered. Its body turned into the heavy and turbid extreme yin chi of the origin and merged with the yellow spring. Only the turbid yin talismans were left on the spot, spinning around. From what Luo Fan saw, the reason why these invisible talisman ghosts fought and bit each other in other places was to obtain the turbid yin talismans from other invisible talisman ghosts. But at this time, these invisible rune ghosts seemed to have been completely blinded by the temptation. They continuously rushed towards Luo Fan. Even if they collided with the invisible force, causing their heads to bleed and their bodies to collapse, they still didn't give up. They were even more dismissive of the heavy turbid yin talisman that they had been longing for. In the blink of an eye, Luo Fan's body was surrounded by hundreds of heavy yin talismans. These talismans revolved around the 10 feet diameter vacuum around his body, just like a planet revolving around the sun. Although Luo Fan was refining the world in the sleeve, he still paid attention to the situation around him. Seeing this scene, with a thought, a brand new talisman that had never appeared before took shape in his mind. Then, it was instantly shot into the cloud that covered his left hand. The timing of the talisman entering was just the moment when the world in the sleeve was about to be completed. After the talisman entered it, crackling sounds could be heard continuously. The cloud suddenly shrank, condensed, and formed a sleeve that looked the same as before, wrapping around his left hand. The way of mutual promotion and restraint is really mysterious. Just by adding the North Wind Raw Stone, I can actually open up a void that is 10 times the size. After sensing the size of the world in the sleeve, Luo Fan seemed to have understood something. In such a short period of time, the tens of thousands of invisible talisman ghosts that were rushing over were all dispersed by the invisible force, leaving only tens of thousands of turbid yin talismans spinning around. Because there were so many heavy yin talismans, they stacked on top of each other and almost covered his entire body. With a thought, Luo Fan, that invisible force instantly disappeared. The yellow spring water lost its resistance and rushed straight over, hitting the layer of invisible membrane on the surface of his body. Then, Luo Fan waved his left hand and opened his big sleeve. The tens of thousands of turbid yin talismans were instantly absorbed into the void of his world in the sleeve. After the 2 rounds of sweeping just now, there were no more invisible talisman ghosts in the surrounding hundreds of miles, except for the yellow spring water. It became a large empty space. Suddenly, Luo Fan's blood flowed, and a kind of enlightenment appeared in his heart. He already knew that Hongjun had just successfully passed the first tribulation, the Gungjin lightning fire tribulation. Raising his head, he saw that the weak part of the earth energy shield that was created by Hongjuan's heavenly tribulation had completely recovered to its original thickness and toughness. This finally made Luo Fan completely relaxed. Although he was sure that Hongjun would definitely pass this tribulation, who knew if there would be any accidents before he passed it? Therefore, before that, he had a vague concern in his heart. That place had returned to normal. For the invisible talisman ghosts, it was no longer tempting to leave the yellow spring. Naturally, they would not regard it as a destination. The invisible talisman ghosts that were gradually gathering in the distance lost their destination, and began to circle around. Luo Fan had a flash of inspiration just now, and added a little function to the world in the sleeve. Now that he had nothing to do, he wanted to try it out. With a thought, his figure flashed, and in a few flashes, he had already appeared 1,000 miles away. Here, there were dozens of constantly changing invisible talisman ghosts fighting with each other. At this moment, an invisible talisman ghost had already been torn into several pieces, and was being devoured by several invisible talisman ghosts. The source of the invisible talisman ghost, which was the heavy turbid yin talisman, was being fought by dozens of invisible talisman ghosts. The intensity of the fight had already caused the dozens of invisible talisman ghosts to collapse. With a thought, Luo Fan opened his left sleeve, and a faint golden light flickered in the depths of his big sleeve. An extremely strong Gungjin heavenly thunder aura arose spontaneously. At this moment, all the invisible talisman ghosts that were fighting and devouring the heavy turbid Qi suddenly stopped. Then, they turned to face Luo Fan. In an instant, dozens of black jades piled up to form Luo Fan appeared in front of him. Strange cackles sounded at the same time. It was the invisible talisman ghosts that instantly stopped what they were doing, twisted their bodies, and rushed towards Luo Fan. It really works! Luo Fan saw this, and could not help but smile, feeling very satisfied. Whoosh 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 whoosh, just as he was thinking about this, the dozens of invisible talisman ghosts had already formed a funnel shape, and rushed straight into his left sleeve, directly rushing into the void opened up by the world in the sleeve. With a slight tremble, mournful screams sounded. The dozens of invisible talisman ghosts had already collapsed, and rolling black fog rushed out of the big sleeve, directly merging into the yellow spring, and the dozens of heavy turbid talismans directly entered the void opened up by the world in the sleeve. This is much easier. With a thought, everything in the world in the sleeve appeared in Luo Fan's mind, and he found that everything was as he had expected. He could not help but be overjoyed. The power of luring the invisible talisman ghosts and collecting them just now was not the power of the world in the sleeve itself. It was the talisman that Luo Fan had inserted at the end that was working. There was no need to explain the principle. It was just using the material of the left sleeve that contained the Gung Jin Divine Thunder. Although it was just a small trick, it had already brought endless relief to Luo Fan. At least, he no longer had to worry about the annoyance that the invisible talisman ghosts brought him. As long as he opened up the world in the sleeve, these invisible talisman ghosts would automatically drill into the jar, and collapse into heavy turbid talismans. From the beginning until now, Luo Fan had stored more than 20,000 heavy turbid talismans in the world in the sleeve. It was enough to use them to study the nature of the heavy turbid talismans. The spring water of the yellow spring was no longer a threat to Luo Fan, and the invisible talisman ghosts were too weak, so they had no effect on him. Therefore, Luo Fan did not bother to leave, and directly sat cross-legged in the spring water. His mind and consciousness cut into the world in the sleeve, and he began to examine the more than 20,000 heavy turbid talismans. Luo Fan had already achieved the earthly immortal Tao fruit, and his thinking speed was extremely fast, and his reasoning ability was also extremely strong. It did not take long for him to deduce the nature of the heavy turbid talismans from the more than 20,000 heavy turbid talismans. These talismans were impressively of very strange magic art. This kind of magic art was born from heaven and earth, and it could transform the baleful qi and turbid qi between heaven and earth into an ownerless spiritual consciousness, and bind it in the talisman. It also had the ability to devour other talismans to strengthen its own power. The reason why the invisible talisman ghosts were formed was that this ownerless spiritual consciousness had absorbed too much turbid qi in the yellow spring water that was completely condensed from the heavy turbid qi, and it naturally condensed into the body of the invisible talisman ghost. And the reason why these invisible talisman ghosts were so eager for the Gung Jin Divine Thunder was that as long as they integrated traces of thunder and lightning into the heavy turbid talismans, they could dispel the excessive influence of the heavy turbid qi, and they could even give birth to a relatively complete spiritual consciousness that could grow continuously like a baby. As for the requirements for thunder and lightning, it did not matter what kind of thunder and lightning it was, whether it was the Gung Jin Divine Thunder, the Wu Earth Divine Thunder, or the First Wood Divine Thunder. Even the most ordinary lightning could help it achieve its goal. It was just that the degree of completeness of the spiritual consciousness after absorbing different types of thunder and lightning was different. It's really amazing. If there are countless heavy turbid talismans, then wouldn't I be able to create different kinds of living beings? You can create different kinds of living beings? After understanding the function of the talisman, Luo Fan was greatly shocked, and he suddenly had a ridiculous idea. Chapter 52. Lightning was extremely rare in the Yellow Springs, but it could be found everywhere on the ground. To Luo Fan, as long as he had enough heavy turbid talismans, he could easily purify enough complete spiritual senses. At that time, he could give these heavy turbid talismans bodies at will, which was equivalent to creating enough living beings at will. Even if they were to form a race, it would be an extremely easy task. After thinking for a while, Luo Fan put down this seemingly ridiculous idea. Why did he want to create a race? The primordial world was so vast, and there would definitely be a lot of races. How could there be a lack of the few that he had created? These invisible talisman ghosts can devour each other to strengthen themselves. If I fuse these heavy turbid talismans with each other, I wonder what will happen in the end. Luo Fan thought to himself. Any natural object definitely contained endless mysteries of heaven and earth. Especially in the primordial world, when yin and yang were first distinguished, it was even more so. Although Luo Fan had deduced the power and various characteristics of these tens of thousands of heavy turbid talismans, because of the profoundness of these heavy turbid talismans, he could not completely deduce its principle and essence. Naturally, he did not know what kind of scene the heavy turbid talismans would eventually develop to its peak. With this thought in mind, Luo Fan no longer hesitated. With a thought, an invisible force was forced out, forming a vacuum with a radius of 30 feet around his body. Then, he chose the most complicated and powerful one among the more than 20,000 heavy turbid talismans. With a wave of his sleeve, he placed it in front of himself. The spiritual sense contained in this heavy turbid talisman was already extremely strong. Although its body had been shattered, causing its spiritual sense to have no place to rely on, and no aura of living beings could be emitted. But after it appeared, it was lively in front of Luo Fan, spinning around like a headless fly. Luo Fan raised his hand and gently pointed. A golden bolt of lightning rushed out of thin air from his finger. In the blink of an eye, it rushed into the heavy and turbid talisman. That bolt of golden lightning was naturally the Gung-Jin heavenly thunder. Attracting lightning was too easy for Luo Fan. Don't forget that his robe was condensed by the Gung-Jin heavenly thunder and the Yi-Wood heavenly fire. As the Gung-Jin divine thunder rushed into the talisman, an incomparably mysterious aura emanated from the turbid talisman. A life force that even ordinary creatures could sense was slowly being generated in this heavy and turbid talisman. Like the first judgment of yin and yang, and also like the beginning of heaven and earth, this heavy and turbid talisman gradually produced an inexplicable change. The originally dark and deep spherical rune gradually flashed a bit of golden light. At first, the golden light only appeared at the very center of the rune. Then, it rapidly spread along the lines that formed the rune. Gradually, it spread to every part of the rune. This spread caused the talisman to gradually turn into a golden pill the size of a fist. Wow, like a baby's silent cry, it was transmitted into Luo Fan's mind. Thump, 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 the sound of a heartbeat gradually came into Luo Fan's ears. Along with this beating sound, the golden pill also slightly pulsed, like a water pump, or like a heart, stretching and contracting. An inexplicable feeling appeared in Luo Fan's mind. This kind of feeling was a kind of feeling of witnessing the birth of life, witnessing the formation of spiritual consciousness. It was like seeing one's own child being born. I didn't expect this process to be so wonderful. Feeling touched, he couldn't help but secretly sigh. Suddenly, his mind moved, and a bit of spiritual light condensed from his mind came out from between his eyebrows. In an instant, it was imprinted into the golden pill. With the imprint of this thought, the golden pill suddenly burst out with an incomparably rich dark golden light. This dark golden light continued to strengthen, gradually becoming dazzling, making people unable to look directly at it. All of a sudden, crack! A cracking sound rang out. The dark golden light that filled Luo Fan's eyes suddenly retracted, and a small, thumb-sized baby appeared where the golden pill had been. This little baby was fat and chubby, and his skin was very pink and rosy, making him look extremely cute. Dad! Dad! The baby looked at Luo Fan with two clear and innocent eyes, and said such words that almost made Luo Fan collapse. He carefully recalled the thought that he had imprinted into the golden pill before. It simply contained information about the born Taoism aptitude, and there was no other information at all. Where did the word Dad come from? Dad! Dad! The little baby opened his arms and called out with a smile, as if waiting for Luo Fan to hug him. Fine, fine. You were born because of me, so you can be considered my son. What's the harm in recognizing you as my son? Luo Fan could not bear to reject such a cute baby, so he could only sigh and raise his thumb in front of the baby. The baby was only the size of a thumb, and when Luo Fan raised his thumb, he hugged it as if he was hugging a large pillar. It looked very awkward, but he looked very satisfied. When he came into contact with this baby, Luo Fan realized that this baby was completely made of flesh and blood. It was completely different from what he had thought before, which was that it was made of pure energy. It seems that the profound mystery of the heavy Yin talisman is beyond my imagination. Luo Fan suddenly had this kind of understanding. The baby hugged Luo Fan's thumb and moaned with great satisfaction. He giggled, "Ha ha, Dad." Dad, listening to this young, crisp, but full of trust, Luo Fan's original plan of letting the baby devour the heavy Yin talisman to grow and strengthen to the peak was no longer able to continue. It seems that I have to find another way to see what this heavy Yin talisman will look like when it is upgraded to the peak, Luo Fan thought to himself. His mind moved, and a section of the mantra flashed in his mind. From the earthly immortal's Tao fruit, a magical power unit separated from it and began to circulate in his meridians in an extremely mysterious path. After a full 81 cycles, this tiny magical power unit had already expanded tens of thousands of times and finally turned into a transparent gas that gradually condensed in the palm of his right hand. With a slight shake of his right hand, this transparent gas suddenly rushed out of his palm and condensed into a fist-sized, transparent, and extremely complicated talisman in his hand. This talisman was spherical in shape, and inside it was a spherical void with a diameter of 10 feet. Although the volume of this void was extremely small, it was filled with rich innate vitality. Looking at the amount, it was even enough for an ordinary person to live for as long as 1,000 years. As this invisible spherical talisman was formed, Luo Fan gently sent the baby who had been giggling into the talisman. After the baby entered, his size suddenly shrank, and in the blink of an eye, he looked like a speck of dust. As expected, Luo Fan looked at the baby and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. After the baby entered the spherical talisman, it was as if he had returned to his mother's womb. He stretched, rubbed his eyes, mumbled a few times, and curled up his body, breathed evenly, and stopped moving. Obviously, he had entered a deep state of sleep. The magic art that Luo Fan had just displayed had a very strange name, Noonday Rest Technique. It was a magic art that opened up the void for living beings to rest, and its power was very mysterious. The size of the void opened up by this magic art was far inferior to other magic arts, such as the Sleeve Universe and the other 36. However, it was the most stable type, and it could be maintained for the longest time. It was just right for Luo Fan's cheap son to live in. Let me say something from the bottom of my heart. It takes courage to turn one's thoughts into words and post them on the internet for everyone to appreciate and criticize. What makes an author who can persist on spending a few hours a day writing words that can be read in a few minutes? I don't know about others, but for me, it's satisfaction. It's the satisfaction of seeing one's own words and ideas being recognized and liked by everyone. I'm not face to face with everyone. If I want to know whether my work has been recognized and liked by everyone, I can only measure it through the clicks, favorites, and recommendations of the book. If there are too few clicks, favorites, and recommendations, it will be a moderate blow to me. Of course, I won't just TJ this book, but the missing points in the writing will definitely be affected. If the missing points in the writing are affected, the written words will definitely not be as good. This is human nature, I think everyone understands. Yes, after saying so much, I actually just want to vent my frustration and ask for support. If everyone thinks that this book is still worth reading, then click, vote, and favorite it. Chapter 53. With a wave of his hand, the talisman transformed from the midday rest technique rushed into the void created by the universe in the sleeve. Luo Fan had absolute control over the void created by the universe in the sleeve, so he didn't have to worry about the heavy turbid talisman harming him if he used the midday rest technique. Although he couldn't bear to use the method he had previously thought of to understand how far the heavy turbid talisman could go, Luo Fan didn't give up on his desire to explore it. With a thought, he instantly retracted the invisible force that he had forced out of his body. The void around him with a diameter of 30 feet was once again filled up by the surrounding spring water. Then, he took a step forward. His figure was like moving clouds and flowing water, covering more than 100 miles in a single step. In just a few dozen steps, he had already entered another area where the invisible talisman ghosts were wreaking havoc. There were hundreds of invisible talisman ghosts engaged in an intense battle. Luo Fan's concealment ability was extremely strong. After entering this battlefield, none of the talisman ghosts actually discovered his existence. Looking at the muddle-headed invisible talisman ghosts that only knew how to devour and strangle each other, Luo Fan sighed helplessly. He raised his left hand and shook it lightly. The universe in the sleeve opened, and a golden light flickered in the depths of the void. With the appearance of this golden light, the scene that happened before happened again. All the fighting invisible talisman ghosts instantly gave up on their opponents and turned into the shape of Luo Fan, pouncing towards him and rushing into the universe in the sleeve like a funnel. Soon, all the surrounding happy ghosts were wiped out. He shook his sleeve a few times, and countless black fog gushed out of his big sleeve, completely merging into the surrounding spring water. This was the method that Luo Fan thought of. This yellow spring was thousands of miles wide, tens of millions of miles long, or even hundreds of millions of miles long. The number of invisible talisman ghosts in it was indescribable. It could be imagined that with so many of them, there would definitely be talisman ghosts that had devoured other invisible talisman ghosts and grown close to the peak realm. The simplest way to find a talisman ghost at such a peak realm was to kill. Killing until blood flowed like rivers and the nether springs were emptied would naturally draw the attention of the peak stage talisman ghost, and it would naturally allow the peak stage talisman ghost that was hiding somewhere to appear before him. Moreover, doing this would allow him to obtain countless Densine talismans, so it wasn't a waste of time. Luo Fan's killing spree lasted for 3 years. During these 3 years, Luo Fan had killed more than 50 million invisible talisman ghosts. The yellow spring that stretched for millions of miles around him had been completely cleared by him, and no formless talisman ghosts could exist in this area. Although the space inside his sleeve was 10 times larger than before, it was still a little crowded with 50 million fist-sized heavy impure Een talismans. Floating in the yellow spring, Luo Fan's expression didn't change at all, and he seemed very calm. Killing millions of invisible talisman ghosts didn't cause him any psychological pressure. In his opinion, these shapeless talisman ghosts were simply existences that possessed incomplete spiritual sense, and they couldn't even be considered as living beings. Annihilating them was equivalent to crushing a rock into powder. Could it be that a person would feel any psychological pressure because of this? It's been more than 3 years, it's about time. Luo Fan stood in the water and thought to himself. In these 3 years, he had been killing these invisible talisman ghosts non-stop, and at the same time, he was paying attention to all movements in the yellow spring, waiting for the invisible talisman ghost that had absorbed and grown to the peak. The reason why he stopped killing at this time was because he had a sudden inspiration when he was killing the invisible talisman ghost. He had a premonition in his heart. This premonition made him understand that his goal was probably about to succeed. Ha ha ha! Just as Luo Fan finished thinking, a grand and strange laughter drifted and gradually echoed in his ears, as if the whole world was filled with this strange laughter. It was very shocking and huge. Listening carefully, this strange laughter seemed to be the fusion of millions of invisible talisman ghosts' laughter. Not only was it grand, but it was also very orderly, making it quite shocking to listen to. This strange laughter naturally didn't have any effect on Luo Fan. With a faint smile on his face, he turned his head to look at the upper reaches of the yellow spring. Even though this strange laughter was extremely loud and erratic, with Luo Fan's cultivation that had attained the earthly immortal Tao fruit, how could he possibly be unable to notice the direction this strange laughter came from? Right at this moment, in the distance, a huge dark cloud that was 1,000 miles wide suddenly appeared out of nowhere 100 miles away. It was so huge that it filled up the entire yellow spring. Then, it rushed towards Luo Fan's position at an extremely fast speed, as if it was teleporting. In the blink of an eye, it crossed a large distance, and in the blink of an eye, it crossed another large distance. Luo Fan frowned slightly. Looking closely, he found that this large black cloud was actually formed by countless invisible talisman ghosts. These countless invisible talisman ghosts lost their bodies and intertwined with each other, fusing together in a very strange way. This whole body was very complete, to the point that Luo Fan could only occasionally see that it was not a natural whole from its shape changes. I was wondering what it was. So it's a newly formed talisman ghost. At this moment, a leisurely sigh came from the black cloud. With this sigh, the large black cloud had already arrived in front of Luo Fan and stopped 100 feet away from Luo Fan, facing Luo Fan from afar. Formed talisman ghost. Luo Fan frowned. This term was quite strange, but it seemed to contain some special charm. Just as Luo Fan was thinking about this term and did not respond to the voice, the large black cloud surged and gradually split open, forming a fissure that was 30 feet wide. The location of this fissure happened to be in the direction of Luo Fan's position in the black cloud. This fissure was at least a mile long, and it extended straight into the depths of the black cloud. Amidst the leisurely sigh, although the surrounding invisible talisman ghosts were still laughing strangely, they had already lowered their voices to the extreme. Countless sounds intertwined together, but it only formed an existence similar to background music. It did not affect the conversation at all. There was no need to say much about Luo Fan's strong eyesight. The moment the fissure split open, he could see through the fissure to the situation in the depths of the black cloud. It was a throne. It was 30 feet wide and the back was 30 feet long. It was carved with countless mysterious, beautiful, ugly, ferocious, and vulgar reliefs. It was filled with an indescribable profundity, and it gave off an attractive aura. On this throne sat a humanoid figure. It was 15 feet tall, and its face was extremely ugly. It had 2 spiral horns on its head, and its skin was covered in scales. Its entire body gave off an aura of being that controlled everything, and it was an existence that was superior to everyone else. When Luo Fan saw this existence clearly, this existence also saw Luo Fan clearly. It rested one hand on the armrest of the throne to support its chin, while the other hand was placed on its thigh. It was tapping lightly, and it seemed to contain some sort of rhythm. 2 large eyes that were like copper bells looked at Luo Fan, and there was an indescribable feeling in them. It seemed to be greed, familiarity, and pity. It's the same kind. After becoming a visible talisman ghost, devouring more invisible talisman ghosts is useless. This has been proven through my personal experience over the past 10,000 years. Although this existence was extremely ugly and ferocious, its voice was very gentle, and could even be said to be filled with magnetism. The same kind? I'm not the same kind as you. Luo Fan finally heard what the existence called him, and he could not help but laugh. At this moment, the throne had somehow crossed the distance of a mile along the fissure, and arrived in front of the black cloud. Chapter 54. My form talisman ghosts are formed from formless talisman ghosts devouring their own kind to grow and evolve. You are the first companion I've met in tens of thousands of years, and you can be said to be my only hope for further growth and evolution. I've been waiting for you for 100,000 years. Do you think I won't let you go just because you deny it? The formless talisman ghost didn't change at all. It was still sitting there leisurely, propping its chin and tapping its thigh. Luo Fan couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense. A mantra flowed through his mind. His eyes shot out two beams of golden light, like searchlights, and covered the formless talisman ghost. In an instant, a thick black fog appeared in front of Luo Fan's eyes. The mystique that could see through formations and illuminate the source actually failed on this formless talisman ghost. With a thought, the two beams of golden light from Luo Fan's eyes became even more intense and dazzling. The power of illuminating the source also became even stronger. This strengthening allowed him to see some things that he couldn't see before. After seeing more, he understood why his mystique had lost its effect. This mystique is really mysterious, and it doesn't seem difficult to do. After seeing it clearly, Luo Fan was eager to give it a try. The formless talisman ghost seemed to be sitting alone on the throne, but in fact its aura and energy had completely fused with the hundreds of millions of formless talisman ghosts around it. The throne looked solid, but in fact it was constructed from extremely pure and turbid yin qi. It had a mysterious connection with the hundreds of millions of formless talisman ghosts in the dark clouds, completely connecting their powers together. This allowed the formless talisman ghost on the throne to use the power of the hundreds of millions of formless talisman ghosts at will. The reason why Luo Fan couldn't illuminate the source of the formless talisman ghost was because the formless talisman ghost hid itself in the depths of the hundreds of millions of formless talisman ghosts. To see through the formless talisman ghost, one had to first see through the hundreds of millions of formless talisman ghosts. No matter how strong this mystique that could illuminate the source was, it would always be limited by Luo Fan's cultivation. Luo Fan's Earth Immortal Dao fruit level was clearly not enough for him to completely see through the hundreds of millions of formless talisman ghosts, although he couldn't see through the source. Based on what he saw and the countless spells in his memory, Luo Fan was already confident that he could deduce a spell with the same effect. So that's how it is. Is this the divine ability you obtained after you gained a tangible form? It seems like it can only see through formations. It's much worse than mine. The talisman ghost seemed to have been lonely for too long. Unexpectedly, it didn't have the slightest anxiousness as it chatted with Luo Fan. Are you the only formless talisman ghost in the entire Yellow Springs? Luo Fan retracted his magical ability and suppressed the excitement in his heart. He didn't answer the question of the talisman ghost, but instead calmly asked, Mystique, 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 but from what I've seen in the past 100,000 years, I'm the only one that can turn formless into something tangible. I wanted to continue walking, but I found an aura that made me panic. I could only wait for you to appear within 100 million miles. The formless talisman ghost was also very calm. It actually answered all of Luo Fan's questions. You're waiting for the formless talisman ghost to appear, not me. Luo Fan smiled. Sigh. Looks like your spiritual consciousness is still incomplete. You can't inherit the wisdom in the Yin talisman. I said so much, but I still can't get you to inherit it. What a pity. I wanted to communicate with my own kind, but I didn't expect to meet one who doesn't even know what he is. Boring, boring. The formless talisman ghost said disappointedly. As it spoke, it lifted the hand that was hitting its thigh to the side of its head. Then, it flicked its wrist and waved forward. A large cloud with a radius of 300 meters separated from the dark clouds. After the clump of clouds separated from the cloud, It quickly condensed into a 30 feet tall figure that looked exactly the same as Luo Fan. Then, with a loud crash, it landed 10 feet in front of Luo Fan. To be able to devour 10 million talisman ghosts, your strength is certainly not weak. I wonder if you can fight against 10,000 formless talisman ghosts. Let me see your strength. The formless talisman ghost said calmly and leisurely. Quack, quack, quack. The 30-meter-tall figure cackled strangely. He grasped the air with both hands and a 5-meter-long spear appeared in his hand. Then, with a shake of the spear, countless spear shadows shrouded a radius of 100 zhang. Like a waterfall, they covered the sky and covered everything. When Luo Fan saw this, he could not help but be greatly surprised. Not only was the spear shadow fast, but it also conformed to some mysterious principle. Every spear strike, every tremble contained endless mysteries. Even the yellow springs were sealed, so within a radius of 100 zhang, there was not a single place that could allow an ant to escape. Moreover, the power of the spear shadows was restrained to the extreme. It looked vast and earth-shattering, blocking people's vision as if there was infinite power erupting at any moment. But in fact, the power contained in the spear shadows did not leak at all. As long as it did not hit the target it chose, there would not be any dissipation, and there would not be any wastage. This, however, contained all the mysteries of the spear technique. If this set of spear techniques was sorted out, it would be enough for an ordinary mortal. In the future, there was no such person in the current primordial world, to cultivate and enter the Tao. Although it would not allow him to attain the earth immortal Tao fruit, it was definitely possible for him to absorb connate essence qi and cultivate an immortal body for 10,000 years. It seems that the tangible talisman ghost has spent all its time figuring out the martial Tao. Luo Fan had a guess when he saw it. At the same time, he had a rough idea of the abilities of the tangible talisman ghost. Although the spear technique was mysterious, it was nothing to Luo Fan. He raised his hand and pointed. A Dharma power unit rushed out of his finger and turned in the air. It turned into a 3 feet tall Buzhou mountain floating above his head and emitted billions of rays of light. The power of the 10,000 invisible talisman ghosts had already exceeded the range that Luo Fan could deal with his *** talent. However, it could not compare to even the weakest Dharma power unit. The endless spear shadows bombarded the rays of light. The infinite power contained in them was instantly triggered, producing an extremely powerful shock wave that spread in all directions. However, the effect was like a noodle hitting a steel plate. It could not cause any damage to the seemingly fragile rays of light. Instead, the spear shadows shattered and gradually scattered. The waterfall-like spear shadows that covered an area of 100 feet gradually shrunk and faded away. In the end, it turned into a spear. It pointed straight at the top of Luo Fan's head, the 3 feet tall Buzhou mountain. Luo Fan raised his hand and pointed at the Buzhou mountain above his head. A golden spear rushed out from the Buzhou mountain. With a sudden tremble, 36 spear shadows appeared and wrapped around the black spear held in the hands of the 3 feet tall figure. This Buzhou mountain was essentially a complicated and mysterious three-dimensional talisman seal. It was also Luo Fan's Dharma power unit. It was formed by the condensation and compression of a higher level of energy than primal chaos qi. Over the years, it had absorbed an unknown amount of primal chaos qi and innate vitality qi. When these energies entered the Dharma power unit, they were naturally assimilated and transformed into an indescribably wonderful energy. The various spells, techniques, and divine abilities that Luo Fan had cultivated over the years, except for some of the more commonly used ones, were basically hidden in these Dharma power units. This golden spear was condensed from the indescribably wonderful energy that Luo Fan had casually needed. Whether it was toughness or toughness, it was no less than well-tempered steel. Chapter 55. The trajectory of the 36 spear shadows was mysterious and unpredictable. Although it was very different from the waterfall-like spear shadows from before, the essence of the two was the same. In fact, the trajectory of the golden spear was even more mysterious. Astonishingly, with just a glance, Luo Fan had already completely grasped the essence of the spear technique. He had even compressed it, turning the endless spear shadows into 36. Most of the power contained in the black spear had been triggered by the billions of rays of light. At this moment, the power contained in the spear had been weakened by more than 90%, and it was being twisted by the 36 spear shadows. In an instant, a powerful explosion erupted, and a boundless shock wave erupted from it and swept in all directions. Following that, the black spear was completely shattered and returned to its origin. The black mist was completely absorbed by the surrounding yellow spring. The 36 spear shadows didn't stop because of that. Instead, they continued to charge forward and strangled the 10 m tall figure. They were like a silk net that wrapped around the figure. As soon as the net contracted, shrill cries of anguish rang out from within, and boundless black mist spread out in all directions before being devoured by the yellow springs and disappearing without a trace. Luo Fan gently pointed, and the 36 spear shadows instantly disappeared, revealing a dazzling golden spear. It floated in the air and pointed straight at the place where the talisman ghost was located. At the tip of the spear, there was a strange heavy turbid talisman. This heavy turbid talisman was at least 10 times larger than an ordinary heavy turbid talisman. It looked like a basketball as it spun around the tip of the spear randomly. Clap, clap, clap. Soft applause came from the front. Luo Fan looked and saw the talisman ghost clapping in surprise. It seemed to be admiring Luo Fan's ability. I didn't expect your innate ability to bring such power. You should know that I spent tens of thousands of years perfecting this spear technique. You actually learned it with just a glance. I want to know how much my strength will increase after devouring you. The talisman ghost seemed very excited as it spoke. At this time, Luo Fan was not interested in explaining that he was not of the same kind. He had been in the primordial world for tens of thousands of years, and during this period of time, his improvement was so great that it was astounding. However, he had not fought with anyone before this. In other words, he didn't have a direct understanding of how powerful the magic arts he cultivated were and how he should use them to their fullest potential. At this time, this talisman ghost had clearly spent all its energy on figuring out martial arts, and its mastery of martial arts had reached an unimaginable level. It just so happened that he could use it to sharpen his combat ability and hone the techniques that he had cultivated over the years, completely transforming them into his own combat power. What other moves do you have? I'm a little interested now. Luo Fan smiled. He opened his big sleeve and covered it, putting the heavy turbid talisman on the spear tip into his sleeve. If 10,000 invisible talisman ghosts aren't enough, then I'll use 100,000 at once. The talisman ghost was expressionless. He raised his hand and waved gently like before. Another large mass of black fog rushed out of the dark clouds and rapidly condensed in midair. It turned into a figure that was the same size as Luo Fan, and looked exactly the same as Luo Fan. Apart from the color of his body, there was no difference between him and Luo Fan at all. This figure was holding a large saber. Although it was 2/3 smaller than the previous one, its entire body was domineering and looked more than 10 times stronger than the previous one. As soon as this figure appeared, it let out a strange laugh. Moreover, without any hesitation, it suddenly pounced towards Luo Fan, raised its hand and slashed towards Luo Fan. This slash looked very ordinary. There was no gorgeous saber shadow, nor was there any dazzling saber light. It looked very simple, as if it was just a simple slash. However, this slash was so natural. Under this slash, the person who was hit even felt like being hit by this slash was like a drop of water falling to the ground. It was an unstoppable and irresistible rule. When Luo Fan saw this, he was inwardly surprised. This slash actually contained an extremely mysterious saber technique. It was not inferior to the previous set of spear techniques at all. Moreover, because this figure was 10 times stronger than the spear-wielding figure from before, it made this move even harder to block and resist. With a thought, the golden spear flashed in the void out of nowhere and turned into 6 spear shadows, entangling the large saber from 6 directions. In that instant, the broadsword also gave birth to countless changes. It was like an antelope hanging its horns, but also like a divine stroke. With a light swing and a flash, in an impossible situation, it simultaneously blocked the 6 spear shadows. It blocked the attacks of the 6 spear shadows, and it was unable to advance a single bit further. Fortunately, that set of spear techniques was not inferior to this set of saber techniques at all. With just a thought from Luo Fan, the spear shadows flashed and turned, and then split into 6, adding up to a total of 12. Following a mysterious trajectory, they attacked the seemingly perfect saber technique's flaw. This saber and spear moved in a flash in the battlefield within a radius of 1,000 feet. In the blink of an eye, they had already exchanged more than 10,000 moves. That saber technique was naturally mysterious and unfathomable. However, the spear technique was not at a disadvantage, and they were evenly matched. Neither of them could do anything to the other. Suddenly, Luo Fan's mind moved slightly. In the Buzhou mountain above his head, a golden saber rushed out. With a swoosh, like a natural wind blowing past, it lightly brushed past the black shadow wielding the saber. Impressively, it contained the essence of the black shadow saber technique, and it was even more concise and mysterious. Chi-chi-chi-chi, countless crisp sounds rang out. The figure wielding the saber, along with the saber, instantly collapsed, turning into countless black fog. It tumbled, and was completely swallowed by the surrounding yellow springs water. Only a heavy Yin talisman that was 100 times larger than an ordinary one was left on the spear tip. The size of this heavy Yin talisman was so large, it was the size of 10 basketballs. It was unknown how the black shadow stuffed it into the body that was the same size as Luo Fan. What a pity! I originally wanted to play with you, but your talent has already made me afraid. I have no confidence that I can use martial arts to kill you, so I can only rely on the strongest power. At this moment, the tangible talisman ghost let out a sigh. Luo Fan also felt that it was a pity in his heart. It seemed that his earlier performance had already made the tangible talisman ghost wary, and he could not continue training like this. It is indeed a pity. This is such a good opportunity to train. Luo Fan sighed. At this moment, although the tangible talisman ghost did not move, the throne he was sitting on had undergone a huge change. It was as if it had become a black hole, crazily absorbing all the black fog around it. At the same time, the various strange carvings on it gradually emitted a faint black light, and the countless strange creatures carved on it seemed to have come to life. They began to struggle, twist, and howl. A stronger and stronger aura was emitted from the tangible talisman ghost. The surrounding yellow springs were suppressed by this aura to the point of stagnation, as if they could not move at all. Luo Fan did not care about the changes at all. His expression did not change at all, and he quietly floated there. At most, he only raised his hand and pointed, and the golden spear and the golden saber returned to the Buzhou mountain above his head. Not long after, the large black cloud in front of Luo Fan that was thousands of miles wide and who knows how many miles long was completely devoured, and all of it merged into the tangible talisman ghost's throne. At this moment, the aura emitted by the tangible talisman ghost was so strong that it affected the surrounding area, causing the yellow springs within 1,000 miles to seem to have become cement, completely solidified, and unable to flow at all. Luo Fan measured for a moment, and knew that even if he gave it his all, he could at most achieve 1/10 of the tangible talisman ghost's power. He secretly sighed in his heart. The tangible talisman ghost's face also showed an extremely comfortable expression, as if it was in control of everything. Ha ha! Although I have tried countless times, I am still fascinated by this power every time. The tangible talisman ghost laughed loudly. As he laughed, the throne he was sitting on also emitted a formless roar, and the entire throne trembled slightly, like a tiger before it pounced on its prey. The countless strange creatures carved on it had all come to life, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws in the throne, letting out soundless roars. The billions of light emitted by the Buzhou mountain above Luo Fan's head completely resisted this terrifying aura, so this aura could not affect him at all. His expression was calm, as if nothing had happened. Suddenly, Luo Fan shouted, "Where is the limitless boy?" "The limitless boy is here, obeying Master's orders." An emotionless, robot-like voice floated over. "Subdue this ghost." Luo Fan raised his hand and pointed at the tangible talisman ghost, and said casually. Chapter 56. Understood. The emotionless voice of the limitless boy drifted over once again. "Take me." Just as the talisman ghost expressed his doubts, a disdainful smile appeared on his face, and he opened his mouth slightly as if he was about to sneer. A square palace that was 100 feet tall suddenly fell from the sky and instantly covered him. Then, the square palace suddenly shrank and the talisman ghost was sucked into it. There was a couplet on the left and right side of the square palace. Tao turns into the void body of the universe. It was Luo Fan's only magic treasure, the Infinity Void Palace. The speed of the Infinity Void Palace was extremely fast. Luo Fan was less than 2,000 miles away from the ground, and the horizontal distance was less than 10,000 miles. He only needed one move and the Infinity Void Palace would be able to reach this distance in a short while. When he was waiting for the talisman ghost to transform, he summoned the Infinity Void Palace. Therefore, the Infinity Void Palace could appear at the right time. Luo Fan looked at how the limitless Void Palace easily collected the talisman ghost with a faint smile on his face. The limitless Void Palace was a magic treasure, and it could even increase Luo Fan's perception by 50 times, calculated according to the distance. Taking care of a talisman ghost that was stronger than Luo Fan, but did not have a magic treasure, would it not be as easy as flipping one's hand? "Let me out! Kill! Kill!" A muffled roar faintly came from the limitless Void Palace. After that, a boundless killing intent emanated from the limitless palace and enveloped an area of 10 meters around it, causing the space within this area to seem as solid as cement. "Don't be noisy, or you will be struck by lightning." The Infinity Boy's emotionless voice came from the palace. Luo Fan's heart moved. The scene inside the many-thousand world appeared in his mind. He saw that the talisman ghost was in the void billions of miles away from the mainland. It was sitting on the throne. Its expression was both frightened and angry. Where was the ease and confidence he had when he was facing Luo Fan? His aura was so strong that it was 10 times stronger than when he had first appeared. It covered a radius of 10,000 kilometers, causing the space within 10,000 kilometers to seem to be completely isolated from the outside world. The limitless palace's aura that leaked out from the void was formed precisely because the limitless palace's aura was too strong and leaked out from the mini-kiliocosm. "Kill! Kill!" Along with the sounds of killing, the throne beneath him shook violently. Billions of rays of black light shot out in all directions. The speed of the black light was extremely fast, and its power was also extremely impressive. Even the space of this minor dimension couldn't withstand it. As the black light rushed through, it slightly distorted. "Lays here." The limitless boy's voice sounded. Then, boundless earth element divine thunder was born in the void. These bolts of lightning were deep purple in color, and they fell like rain from the void, covering a radius of 10,000 miles. The corporeal talisman ghost's murderous voice stopped and turned into an incomparably shrill scream. The black light that shot out in all directions retracted in an instant and condensed into a layer of black light shield. It was 100 feet in diameter, and it wrapped around him and the throne he was sitting on. The deep purple earth element divine thunder was completely under the limitless boy's absolute control. It twisted and spiraled in the void like a spiritual snake, shattering the talisman ghost's aura. The talisman ghost's expression changed drastically, and its screams became even more shrill. Lightning was an elixir for the talisman ghost. As long as there was a trace of the most ordinary lightning, the talisman ghost could be purified, freeing itself from the corrosion of the heavy yin qi, and become a complete spiritual consciousness. However, when the invisible talisman ghost devoured countless of its kind and turned invisible into visible, his spiritual sense had completely fused with the heavy and turbid qi of extreme yin. When the thunder and lightning purified the heavy and turbid qi of extreme yin, it was equivalent to purifying his spiritual sense and killing it. As such, the lightning became the most vicious poison. The limitless boy was the treasure spirit of the limitless void palace. The limitless void palace, together with the small kiliacosm, was equivalent to his body. In this place, he was omnipotent, and it was extremely easy for him to know the talisman ghost's weakness. The earth element divine thunder he shot out came from the pool of lightning, and was more condensed and powerful than the earth element divine thunder in the outside world. The talisman ghost could not resist the divine thunder at all, and its aura was instantly shattered. "What the hell are you? You can't be one of my kind. This is definitely not the technique of the talisman ghost. What the hell are you?" The talisman ghost roared in fear, frustration, and anger. At this moment, the earth element divine thunder had already targeted the talisman ghost. Billions of bolts of lightning gathered together and blasted towards the black light shield that could only cover his throne. The black light barrier was formed by the power of over 100 million invisible talisman ghosts. Although it was completely restrained by the earth element divine thunder, there were too many of them, and the power was too strong. It would take some time to destroy it. Luo Fan sighed and said calmly, "When did I say that I'm one of your kind? The untainted land is so vast, and talisman ghosts are not the only ones with complete soul consciousness. I'm still lacking a servant. Are you willing to take up this position?" His words did not come out from his mouth, but from the power of the limitless void palace, which was condensed in the small kiliacosm with his mind. It seemed extremely majestic and grand. It was enough to shock the soul of any living creature. "You want me to be your servant? Ha ha!" The talisman ghost was slightly stunned, and then burst into laughter. It did not seem to be moved by the majestic and grand voice that suddenly appeared in the void. "I command billions of talisman ghosts, and I have a supreme position in the Yellow Spring for nearly a yuan hui. Now you want me to be your servant? Your soul consciousness is in a mess, isn't it?" The talisman ghost laughed for a while and said coldly, "You would rather die than submit. I admire you very much." Luo Fan sighed. Then, with a thought, he took over the control of the limitless void palace from the limitless boy. With a thought, the billions of earth element divine thunder doubled in size. In an instant, the light shield formed by the black light was smashed into pieces. The talisman ghost let out a shrill scream. The 7 apertures of the talisman ghost spurted out a black liquid, which seemed to be its blood. At this moment, the billions of earth element divine thunder had already pounced on the talisman ghost, rushed into its body, and exploded. Boom, 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 boom. Billions of booming sounds merged into one, and endless black fog rolled out from it. In this black fog, there were even heavy yin talismans that were flying everywhere like billiards being hit. Luo Fan's mind moved, and an invisible force appeared in the void, drawing the heavy yin talismans that were splashing in all directions, and collecting them. During this process, the shrill screams kept coming from the talisman ghost's mouth, and it was extremely horrifying. However, during this process, the talisman ghost didn't beg for mercy. "It's useless. This small kiliacosm is under my complete control. The moment you entered this small kiliacosm, the result was decided. Either you die or you surrender. You can't escape by dividing and hiding your soul consciousness like this, Luo Fan said calmly. The whole small kiliacosm was under his perception, and he knew that although the talisman ghost was screaming miserably, it didn't give up trying to escape. He divided his soul consciousness into thousands of parts, and hid them in the heavy turbid talismans that were constantly shooting out. With the help of the surging power, he escaped from the earth element divine thunder. From the beginning until now, there were already hundreds of parts of his soul consciousness that had escaped. As soon as Luo Fan finished speaking, with a thought, an invisible force swept across the void. Poof, poof, poof. The hundreds of heavy turbid talismans instantly exploded, and directly shattered into black fog. Along with the shattering of the fog, the soul consciousness hidden within was also shattered. You dare to destroy my soul consciousness. I will never surrender. Explode. The talisman ghost finally lost all hope and it roared. Chapter 57. Luo Fan sensed the change of energy and instantly grasped the thoughts of the talisman ghost. He sighed in his heart. Why is this necessary? So what if I become a servant? Why would I rather die than obey? Although he sighed in his heart, he didn't show any mercy. With a slight thought, the billions of Wutu divine thunders instantly condensed and twisted. In the blink of an eye, they formed a complicated and abstruse three-dimensional talisman, which directly imprinted on every part of the talisman ghost's body. It locked every bit of energy and spiritual sense of the talisman ghost. Instantly, the talisman ghost became sluggish. It maintained its ferocious, desperate, angry and crazy expression. Its movements were like a stone, stagnating there. The terrifying energy that was about to explode in its body was also instantly locked and stagnated. Where is the limitless boy? After sealing the talisman ghost, Luo Fan shouted. The limitless boy is here, master. The limitless boy's jade-like figure condensed in the void. Suppress this talisman ghost in the depths of the pool of thunder, extract the turbid chi of extreme een, and refine the mini kiliacosm. Luo Fan said calmly. Yes, master. The limitless boy naturally wouldn't ask why he did it. He just said it without any emotion. As he was speaking, he raised his hand and grabbed the huge talisman ghost along with the throne in his hand. It was like a chick catching an eagle. It looked very strange. Then, the limitless boy and the talisman ghost disappeared without a trace. Luo Fan's mind moved. He knew that the talisman ghost and the throne had already gone to the depths of the pool of thunder. The limitless boy had completely integrated into the Wuji Palace. He controlled every drop of thunder water in the pool of thunder, condensed them into countless chains, and locked the talisman ghost and the throne. He kept extracting the turbid chi of extreme een, and through some mysterious mechanism, he integrated it into the whole Wuji Palace. Although the turbid chi of extreme een was the opposite of thunder and lightning, the transformation of yin and yang between heaven and earth had endless mysteries. If this kind of turbid chi of extreme een was used well, it could greatly promote the growth of the pool of thunder. It could also continuously refine the entire Wuji Palace, making the mini kiliacosm stronger. However, this required extremely precise control and transformation of the energy. If he just threw it down and left it alone, it would only cause a violent reaction in the pool of thunder. It might even cause a terrifying annihilation and cause the entire pool of thunder to explode. Of course, Luo Fan could easily complete such control and transformation, but he wouldn't waste too much time on it. Of course, the control and transformation could easily, but he wouldn't waste too much time on it. Following this change, the originally calm lightning pool seemed to have been injected with endless vitality. Waves began to appear, as if there were countless fish and prawns active in it. Luo Fan's mind moved. He took a step forward and entered the limitless Void Palace's minor thousand world. He sat on the platform and waved his hand. The doors of the limitless void palace opened wide, and endless yellow springs water gushed in from the palace. The yellow spring water was restrained by an invisible force in the sky. It floated above the continent and meandered like a ribbon. It was also like the Milky Way. It was bright and dazzling, shining brightly with the ball of light. Luo Fan looked up and secretly nodded his head. With a thought, he closed the palace gate. In that short period of time, the water from the spring of the underworld that entered the palace was already millions of tons. This amount was already huge. But even so, to the entire spring of the underworld, it wasn't much. When the door was opened, the spring water poured in but didn't create a whirlpool. Even though the spring water didn't amount to much compared to the entire spring of the underworld, it was still strange. One look and one would know that the spring water wasn't ordinary spring water. Though the water from the underworld was also formed by turbid chi of extreme een, in terms of purity, it couldn't compare to the talisman ghost. It couldn't even compare to the talisman ghost. Therefore, though it had the ability to refine the palace, it couldn't compare to the turbid chi of extreme een that was extracted from the talisman ghost. Using it to refine this treasure, the effect would be next to nothing. At this time, Luo Fan took the Yellow Springs water into his magic treasure, but he didn't want to use it to refine the magic treasure, but to refine it into a magic treasure. Though an artifact is mysterious, it doesn't have many restrictions on the materials used. Everything in the world, whether it's tangible or intangible, can be made into an artifact. The difference in materials only affects the power of the artifact. The water from the underworld was formed by turbid chi of extreme een. Naturally, it was no exception. It could be used as a material to make an artifact, and the power of the artifact won't be weak. Luo Fan pondered for a moment. Countless lights flickered in his mind and were annihilated. In the blink of an eye, he had already designed how to refine the artifact and what functions to give it. However, this wasn't the time to refine this artifact. According to his design, it would take at least 1,000 years to refine this artifact. This wasn't because the artifact was complicated, but because the amount of water from the underworld was too much. Millions of tons was not a small amount. With a thought, the memories of the limitless boy for the past 3 years unfolded in his mind. It was like watching a movie. Luo Fan completely understood Hongjuan's experience over the years. Hongjun went through the Gung Metal Lightning Fire Tribulation 3 years ago. After that, he didn't move forward immediately. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the peak and began to stabilize his cultivation level. In these 3 years, his body didn't move at all. No matter how the wind blew, how the sun shone, and how the rain poured on him, he was calm and indifferent. Luo Fan didn't give the limitless boy the authority to monitor the energy flow in Hongjuan's body. Therefore, in the limitless boy's memory, there was no change in Hongjuan's cultivation level after the tribulation. What Luo Fan observed through the limitless boy's memory was only the surface situation. However, this already made Luo Fan very satisfied. After Hongjun went through the tribulation, his cultivation level had a certain improvement. This kind of improvement required him to stabilize his mind and cultivate. Therefore, it was a very correct choice to cultivate for 3 years after the tribulation. This period of time wasn't too long nor too short. It was just right. With a thought, the limitless palace had already turned into a purple-yellow light and rushed up. Whether it was the underworld, the chi of earth, or the ground, they couldn't cause any hindrance to it. After a while, the purple-yellow light had already rushed out of the ground. Through the limitless palace's enhancement of perception, Luo Fan instantly found Hongjuan's figure more than 300,000 miles away. He controlled the light to turn, and after a while, it had already come to a place 30 feet above Hongjuan's head. It condensed into a square palace the size of a fist. Luo Fan sensed through the limitless palace, and the condition of Hongjuan's body appeared in his mind. Through the tempering of the Gungjin Thunderfire tribulation, Hongjuan's body had improved by 3 times compared to before the tribulation. Every smallest muscle seemed to be cast from steel wire. At first glance, one could tell that it contained infinite power. This was already a great improvement, but it was only secondary. The most important change was in the energy in his body. The mysterious energy in his body had already undergone a great change. In the midst of this constantly flowing energy, there were threads that looked like spider silk mixed in. These silk threads were light gray, covering every part of his energy. The silk threads were like a 3-dimensional silk net, constantly twisting in his energy, constantly circling, constantly sticking to each other, as if they wanted to form a certain shape, but they didn't have enough strength. When Luo Fan saw the change in the energy, he knew what was going on. These silk threads were trying their best to outline and stick to each other, trying to condense into a 3-dimensional talisman, to transform all the energy in Hongjuan's body into spiritual power. It was a pity that although Hongjun had gone through a tribulation, his cultivation and realm were still not enough. Although he could condense the silk threads to outline the talisman, there was still a long way to go to construct it into a 3-dimensional talisman. Chapter 58. As his perception went deeper, the scene in Hongjuan's sea of consciousness appeared in Luo Fan's mind. As soon as he saw this scene, Luo Fan frowned, and he secretly blamed himself. He saw that this sea of consciousness, whether it was the height or the width, was more than twice as large as the last time he saw it. It seemed to be quite spacious. However, in the middle of this rather broad sea of consciousness, Hongjuan's divine soul was full of anxiety and annoyance. Strands of energy mixed with a large number of threads were produced from a mysterious location, constantly entering and exiting the soul's body. Every time these strands of energy entered and exited the soul's body, the anxiety and annoyance on the soul's face would increase. Its body would even tremble slightly, as if it was showing signs of instability. This was clearly the phenomenon of Hongjuan's realm being insufficient, but he had to forcibly condense 3-dimensional talisman to achieve spiritual power. This approach was undoubtedly extremely harmful to the divine soul. If it weren't for the innate inextinguishable spiritual light above his divine soul that constantly released all kinds of mysterious power while rotating, and the yellow turban Hercules Emperor next to the divine soul emitted a green brilliance from time to nourish the divine soul, Hongjuan's divine soul would have suffered irreparable damage at this time. This result was Luo Fan's mistake. It was because Luo Fan did not fulfill his responsibility as a teacher. He did not tell Hongjun what would happen after the calamity and what to do. That was why Hongjun made this mistake. Luo Fan's mind moved, and his figure had appeared outside Wuji Palace, standing next to Hongjun. He raised his hand and pointed, and a little spiritual light rushed straight into Hongjuan's eyebrows. It entered his sea of consciousness through a mysterious mechanism. It rushed again and instantly integrated into Hongjuan's divine soul. With the integration of this spiritual light, Hongjuan's mind was instantly clear, and he broke away from the previous state of being stuck in a dead end. Before he could think about the doubts, he slowly ran the indomitable heaven and earth technique, and kept all the energy in his body into his lower abdomen. Only then did he have the strength to open his eyes. When he saw Luo Fan by his side, Hongjun quickly stood up and saluted with shame. Luo Fan nodded and said, "You need to remember the truth that speed is not speed. It is already a great opportunity for you to improve your realm. You can't force greater progress. As long as you improve your realm, everything will naturally happen." Hongjuan's admiration for Luo Fan had already risen to the level of worship, so he naturally wouldn't doubt Luo Fan's words. He was suddenly enlightened and ashamed. "Thank you, Master." Luo Fan nodded. Suddenly, his mind moved. He raised his hand and pointed. A little light rushed into Hongjuan's sea of consciousness. It turned into flying characters and patterns that filled the sky. It drilled into his divine soul and completely integrated into it. In just a moment, Hongjun understood that this was a refining technique. Moreover, if he were to refine the 9-spirit cloud radiance handkerchief according to the incantation, he would be able to increase the power of this Dharma artifact by at least 10 times. Thank you for the technique, Master. Understanding this, Hongjun was overjoyed. The 9-spirit cloud light handkerchief had played an extremely important role in his tribulation transcendence, but at the same time, it had also made him feel that the power of this magic tool seemed to be lacking, and he was greatly distressed. Luo Fan nodded and said, "Refine this artifact before you continue." Hongjun quickly obeyed and sat cross-legged. His robe turned into a handkerchief and floated in front of him. Then, he raised his hand and waved. There were some changes in his body. The more condensed and purer energy flowed quickly around the mysterious track. In the end, it turned into talismans and was inserted into the handkerchief. Then, he raised his hand and waved. There were some changes in his body. The more condensed and purer energy flowed quickly around the mysterious track. In the end, it turned into talismans and was inserted into the handkerchief. When Luo Fan saw it, he knew that Hongjun had already comprehended the refining method that he had taught him. He was too lazy to continue watching. With a thought, he turned around and entered the Wuji Palace in the void. That refining technique was what Luo Fan had figured out last time. It was the method to condense talismans into layers of restrictions and insert them into the artifact. When he first saw Hongjun's 9-spirit cloud light handkerchief, he found that Hongjun's method of inserting the 9 application techniques of the secret of supporting heaven and earth into it was very crude. There was no way to exert the supreme power of the artifact. At that time, he had the idea of imparting him the Qi refinement technique. It was delayed until now because of other matters. As Luo Fan entered the Limitless Void Palace, the Limitless Void Palace rotated and disappeared into the void. It was not something that Hongjun could sense. "Limitless Boy, come out and talk," Luo Fan shouted. Limitless Boy's figure instantly condensed in front of Luo Fan. He looked calm and indifferent. He didn't speak and just stood there quietly. Luo Fan naturally wouldn't be angry because of a treasure spirit without self-consciousness. He shouted, "Control the Wuji Palace and follow behind Hongjun. Don't be more than 10 feet away from him. When his life is in danger, help him. Otherwise, don't bother." "Yes, sir," Limitless Boy said emotionlessly. Limitless Boy was equivalent to a supercomputer. Even if he was controlling the lightning pool carefully and extracting the heavy Yin Qi from the talisman ghosts to refine the palace, he still had a lot of energy to do other things. After Luo Fan gave the order, he didn't care about anything else. He raised his hand and pointed. The netherworld Milky Way in the sky made a turn and descended from the sky. In the blink of an eye, it extended to the front of Luo Fan. In this mini kiliacosm, Luo Fan was almost omnipotent. He knew all the details of the netherworld Milky Way in an instant. After thinking about his idea again, Luo Fan finally completely determined every detail of refining this artifact. With a move of his mind, the complicated mantra flowed in his mind. Then, a unit of magic power separated from his earthly immortal Tao fruit and quickly circulated around his meridians. Gradually, it turned into a large blood-red light and gathered in his right palm. With a wave of his left hand and a slap of his right, one heavy Yin talisman after another rushed out of his sleeve and into the netherworld Milky Way. At the same time, one blood-red spherical talisman after another rushed out of his right palm and into the river. The number of heavy Yin talismans corresponded to the blood-red three-dimensional talismans. Every heavy Yin talisman that rushed into the netherworld Milky Way was followed by a three-dimensional talisman. One after another, they flowed out of his hands in an endless stream. It was as if a blood river and a black river were rushing out of his hands and flowing into the netherworld Milky Way. It was a very strange sight. After the heavy Yin talismans and blood talismans entered the netherworld Milky Way, the netherworld Milky Way shook violently. wisps of black mist kept coming out of the river. Then, they were devoured by the lightning pool down below. The black mist was none other than the impurities in the netherworld Milky Way. The spring water of the netherworld Milky Way was condensed from heavy energy and could be considered pure. However, it was still lacking compared to the purity required by the artifact. Therefore, it needed to be purified first. After the blood talismans and heavy talismans entered the netherworld Milky Way, they intertwined with each other, condensing and sticking to each other. Gradually, they turned into layers of restrictions that covered the entire netherworld Milky Way. As time passed, the netherworld Milky Way grew more condensed and pure. Gradually, it emitted a faint yellow light that made it look like a mysterious topaz. Its size and length had shrunk by more than 1,000 times, making it look like a small stream. At this point, 1,000 years had passed.